If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 125, Dilemma. Sazuma Mansion's Garden. Shiko and Seiki exchanged glances as they observed Shin, who had grown so self-assured that he could maintain composure in their presence. Shiko couldn't help but snort, remarking, "Your newfound confidence is solely due to a small successful business venture." Seiki nodded in agreement, adding, "Remember when you couldn't even meet our eyes?" He peered at Shin, who was now looking them in the eye while holding a cup of sake. With a smile, Shin responded, "What can I say? Times have changed." Afterward, he left to join Myra, brushing off the disapproving expressions on his two brothers' faces. In Shin's absence, Shiko and Seiki clenched their teeth and Shiko abandoned his sake, but they made sure not to reveal their inner turmoil to the guests, lest they embarrass themselves. Observing Shin converse with his two brothers, Myra whispered, "Did you manage to talk to them effectively?" She was aware that Shin had a strained relationship with his first and third brothers. Shin noticed the concern in Myra's expression and responded with a reassuring smile, speaking calmly, "Don't worry. I was able to have a productive conversation with them." Myra nodded, and then she, along with Shin, joined in the Super Mario Bros. Competition hosted by Sazuma Suzuki. To everyone's surprise, Myra emerged as the winner, and Sazuma Suzuki chuckled, saying, "You are truly a worthy wife for my grandson. You've achieved the high score, and therefore, you've won 10 million yen." Overjoyed, Myra hugged Shin, but her realization of the many onlookers around caused her to blush shyly. The guests shared light laughter at Myra's actions and reactions, while some members of the Suzuki family simply cast indifferent glances, unmoved by her victory of a mere 10 million yen in their eyes. Subsequently, several guests gathered around Shin and Myra, engaging in conversations about their business. Before long, Shin's family joined them: his father, mother, and two sisters, Rookie and Reina. With a sigh of relief, Rookie directed her gaze at Shin and Myra and commented, "I'm glad you've finally opened up to the family, Shin." She felt the weight of keeping Shin's marital status and his successful company, Kishin, a secret, and she wasn't alone. Their mother, Eri, shared in her sense of relief. Meanwhile, Reina cast a sardonic look at Shin and quipped, "Little brother, now that you're rich, can you spare me 100 million yen? When Shiro and Eri heard their eldest daughter's audacious request for 100 million yen, their eyes widened, and they both scolded her. Shiro didn't wait for Shin's response as he reproached her, "Have you no sense of shame? Don't you realize that your little brother worked hard to earn every penny?" Eri nodded in agreement as she fixed her disappointed gaze on Reina, saying, "Have we really spoiled you this much?" Her eyes conveyed her deep disappointment. Observing that she had garnered opposition, Reina, her eyes glistening with emotion, inquired, "What's the harm in asking? If he doesn't want to, he can simply say he's short on funds, right?" In the distance, Reina's cousins, Kazue and Etsuko, couldn't help but chuckle at Reina's spirited behavior. Shin and Myra exchanged a shared look, and Shin let out a sigh as he addressed Reina, "Big sister, you shouldn't rely too heavily on others for money. You should work hard to earn your own income." Reina glanced at Shin and snorted, retorting, "So, you're giving me a lecture now? If you don't want to give, then don't." With that, she huffed and walked away. Following this, Shiro and Eri turned to Shin with apologetic expressions. Shiro offered, "Forgive your eldest sister if she misbehaved." Eri also spoke kindly to Reina in Shin's presence, though he merely smiled and assured them that he didn't mind. Subsequently, as Sazuma Suzuki's birthday celebration drew to a close, Sazuma and Kumiko engaged in conversation with Shin and Myra, seemingly ignoring their other grandchildren. Shiro, as well as Shiro's other brothers, observed this with a solemn demeanor. The birthday celebration concluded, and Shin, Myra, and Chiko left the mansion. Sazuma and Kumiko, along with Shiro and Eri, saw them off. As Shin and Myra were on the verge of entering their car, with Ctto already seated on his motorcycle, Sazuma extended an invitation, saying, "If the three of you ever find the time, you're always welcome to visit me here." Both Shin and Ctto nodded in acknowledgement. Shin and Myra settled into the car with their pets, while Ctto, donning a helmet, mounted his motorcycle and slowly pulled away. Sazuma, Kumiko, Shiro, and Eri gazed at the receding motorcycle and Shin's car in the distance. Sazuma let out a sigh, reflecting, "Time has passed so quickly, and my fine grandsons have grown up." His wife by his side shared in his sense of nostalgia. In the midst of this, Shiro and Eri exchanged smiles. Meanwhile, in the USA, Kishin's video games were on the rise, approaching the daily sales figures of Tora 16-bit. Many players engaged in discussions about Kishin's video games. One player asserted, "I've played The Legend of Zelda, and I feel like no game can beat it for me." Another player countered, "No way. Metroid is the best, in my opinion." A newcomer chimed in, "Metroid and The Legend of Zelda? They're both great, but they can't compare to Super Mario Bros. 1, 2, or 3. They're all the best." The first two players exchanged disdainful glances in response to the new player's enthusiasm. Yet another player chuckled and remarked, "Ha ha ha. You're all playing child's games. Try playing Kid Icarus, and let's see if you can even get past the first level." Upon hearing this, the others distanced themselves from the boastful player. Kid Icarus was indeed unique but also, in their eyes, rather vexing. They were accustomed to games with save options, and needing to remember codes for it for a difficult game like Metroid was one thing, but Kid Icarus posed a different kind of challenge. They found it nearly impossible to progress past the first level, making it a polarizing addition to the Kishin gaming lineup. Meanwhile, as Kishin's growth in the USA continued to thrive, a significant challenge emerged that could either catapult Kishin to greater success or result in significant losses for Shin. Universal Studios filed a lawsuit against Kishin, claiming that Donkey Kong had infringed upon the character King Kong. The news spread through various media outlets, instantly becoming a hot topic of discussion in the USA. Chapter 126, Reactions on Lawsuit. New York, United States. Tora U.S. Headquarters. Upon hearing the news of Kishin facing a lawsuit from Universal Studios, Luther and the other executives couldn't contain their joy. Luther chuckled and remarked, "Could this spell the end for that rapidly growing company?" One of the executives joined in with a sly smile, saying, "Hee, Universal Studios has a much higher chance of winning, especially considering the striking resemblance between King Kong and Donkey Kong, right?" Luther and the executives nodded in agreement, and one of them added, "Hee, this might just be the downfall of that troublesome company." Luther flashed a grin at his secretary and instructed, "Fetch us some drinks, we have a reason to celebrate." His secretary nodded and exited the room while the executives shared hearty laughter. Tokyo, Japan. Suzuki Trademark Entertainment Headquarters. The news made its way to Japan, prompting Seiki to call his older brother, Shiko, and share the exciting development. In a low voice, Seiki muttered, "You've been a constant thorn in our side, little brother, but now it seems the world doesn't want you to succeed." Suzuki Group Headquarters. Chairman's Office. Shiro sat in his office with a solemn expression as he watched the news of Kishin's legal battle against Universal Studios unfold on the television screen. He dialed Shinro's phone, but there was no answer. A sense of worry crept over him as he couldn't help but be concerned for his youngest son. Tora Corporation Headquarters. President Taro Ikeda and the executives couldn't conceal their smiles as they received the good news. With a grin on his face, President Taro Ikeda inquired of the executives, "Do you believe Kishin will be able to weather this setback?" One of the executives shook his head and commented, "I doubt it. Universal Studios seems to have a strong case, after all." Another executive nodded and concurred, "That's a valid point." President Taro Ikeda's smile grew broader as he remarked, with Kishin's decline, we'll have fewer competitors. Now, only Suzuki remains as our main rival in the video game industry." The executives nodded in agreement, their smiles mirroring the president's satisfaction. Toshima Ward, Tokyo, Japan. Kishin's headquarters. Shin and Myra were in his office together, with Myra wearing a worried expression on her face. She asked, "Do you think we'll really lose this one, Shin?" As she gazed at Shin, who remained largely expressionless. Despite his stoic exterior, Shin couldn't help but feel the irony of the situation he currently found himself in. Why? Hadn't Nintendo faced a similar predicament in his previous life? But, thanks to a certain individual, Nintendo had been rescued from the brink of bankruptcy. With a sigh, Shin reassured Myra, saying, "Don't worry too much." He paused, offering a comforting smile to ease Myra's concerns, and continued in a calm tone, "We'll assemble a team of lawyers to handle the lawsuit from Universal Studios." Myra nodded, putting her worries aside. New York, USA. In a random apartment, a man watched the television. CNN News. The news anchor reported, Kishin Electronics and Kishin Entertainment have firmly denied the accusations made by Universal Studios regarding their highly popular video game in the United States, Donkey Kong. Let's hear from Kishin's US president. The scene transitioned to Kishin's US headquarters, where a Japanese man was being interviewed by reporters. The man was Oryo Masayoshi, facing a multitude of reporters from various media outlets. In response to a question from one of the reporters, he stated, "We categorically reject any allegations made by Universal Studios. The character Donkey Kong possesses its own distinct backstory and background, entirely separate from the character King Kong." A CNN reporter then inquired, "Universal Studios has claimed that the build and design of the character Donkey Kong closely resembles King Kong. Additionally, they assert that the girl captured by Donkey Kong bears a striking resemblance to the King Kong franchise. What are your comments on these claims?" Another reporter posed similar questions to Oryo Masayoshi. As he fielded the barrage of questions from the reporters, Oryo Masayoshi couldn't help but feel a tinge of regret about his recent promotion to the role of US President for Kishin. In a silent moment of contemplation, he wondered, "Why do things always seem to take an unexpected turn when it comes to me?" Memories of the Tetris negotiations and his current predicament weighed on his mind. Oryo Masayoshi simply replied, "I have no comments at this time." Following his statement, reporters continued to fire a barrage of questions at him as he made his way to the gate of the Kishin building. With the assistance of his bodyguards, who blocked the reporters' advances, Oryo Masayoshi turned helplessly toward the press and added, "We will address these allegations in court through our legal representatives. Thank you." With that, he entered the Kishin building. The scene then shifted to the CNN studio, where the news anchor faced the camera and stated, "Universal Studios maintains that Donkey Kong infringes on the character of King Kong. They are committed to using all available means to hold Kishin accountable for the damage to their franchise's reputation and to seek restitution for the profits earned from the video game Donkey Kong." The man in the apartment watched the TV with keen interest before turning it off. His attention shifted to the Donkey Kong video game cartridge, and he absent-mindedly stroked his chin, saying, "This might be a job opportunity for me." He smiled as he spoke. At 30 years old, he was a lawyer employed at the Mudge Rose Guthrie Alexander and Ferdin law firm. Although he had received only a few requests for legal work lately and hoped for more projects, it had been some time since he had heard from the company. Consequently, he had developed a fondness for playing video games in his free time. One of the games he enjoyed playing was Donkey Kong, and to him, it would be a shame if Kishin, a company known for producing quality video games, were to suffer a loss simply because of this particular game. Meanwhile, Kishin's partners, including Target, Kmart, and others, held a meeting to reassess their partnerships with Kishin. If Kishin were to lose the lawsuit, it could potentially have a minor impact on their business relationships. Simultaneously, they were keen to determine who would gain the upper hand in court and emerge as the victor. They weren't overly concerned about Kishin's potential loss, even if Kishin's reputation took a hit and they experienced some fallout as a result, the impact would be relatively minor and wouldn't cause significant harm. Meanwhile, Shin had already dialed Oryo Masayoshi's number to discuss how to handle the situation. Shin had Oryo Masayoshi contact various law firms in the United States, but few were willing to offer assistance. Then, Shin suddenly recalled something and said to Oryo Masayoshi, "Try reaching out to Mudge Rose Guthrie Alexander and Ferdin. They might have someone who can truly assist us with this." Although Oryo Masayoshi was puzzled, he followed Shin's advice and agreed to explore this avenue. Chapter 127, The Trial. Manhattan, New York. Madison Avenue. Headquarters of Mudge Rose Guthrie Alexander and Ferdin. Oryo Masayoshi made contact and personally visited the law firm's headquarters. This visit was carried out under specific instructions from Shin. Managing Partner's Office. Oryo Masayoshi found himself in Christian Foley's office, seated on the sofa. Christian Foley held the position of managing partner at Mudge Rose Guthrie Alexander and Ferdin law firm. He served coffee to Oryo Masayoshi and initiated a discussion regarding the Universal Studios lawsuit against Kishin's Donkey Kong. After some time, Christian Foley suggested that their senior partner, Joseph Kirby, take charge of the case. Joseph Kirby, a 30-year-old man, was currently in his office with associates working alongside him. A man entered Joseph Kirby's office and informed him, "Mr. Kirby, the managing partner has requested your presence." Joseph neatly arranged the papers on his desk, nodding at the man, and then exited his office to head to the managing partner's office. Upon entering, he encountered the middle-aged managing partner, Christian Foley, and an unfamiliar Asian man. Joseph was taken aback as he recognized the Japanese man from a television appearance the previous night. Christian Foley nodded at Joseph Kirby and proceeded to introduce Oryo Masayoshi. He explained, "Mr. Kirby, this is Oryo Masayoshi, the president of Kishin US. He's here to request legal representation for the Universal Studios lawsuit." Joseph Kirby nodded in acknowledgement and said, "I saw news coverage of the lawsuit." Following this, he engaged in a discussion with Oryo Masayoshi before eventually accepting Kishin's offer. "At this juncture, we must gather data and evidence to demonstrate that Kishin did not infringe on Universal Studios' King Kong and counter their lawsuit," Joseph Kirby remarked, to which Oryo Masayoshi concurred. On August 5, 1991, the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York hosted the trial. Universal Studios accused Kishin of copyright infringement concerning Donkey Kong, which had generated $30 million in profits in the USA. Numerous media outlets were present to document the proceedings. The attorneys for both sides commenced with their opening statements, laying out their arguments for the jury. Universal Studios' legal representative contended that Donkey Kong constituted a clear infringement of King Kong. In response, Joseph Kirby, the legal representative for Kishin, along with his partners and associates, argued that Donkey Kong represented a transformative work that did not violate Universal Studios' copyright. The judge maintained a solemn silence while attentively listening to the opening statements from both sides. He brought his gavel down on the table to restore order, putting an end to the tumultuous arguments. Order in the court. With the judge's stern declaration, both sides noticeably quieted down and proceeded with their opening statements. After some time, the judge called for witness testimony. The first witness to take the stand was Joel Curtis, none other than the president of MCA, Inc., the parent company of Universal Studios. Joel Curtis testified that he had played a role in the development of the King Kong film and firmly believed that Donkey Kong was a derivative work of King Kong. The judge then granted Kishin the opportunity to cross-examine. Kishin's legal representative skillfully cross-examined and highlighted the distinctions between Donkey Kong and King Kong. Joseph Kirby and his partners emphasized that Donkey Kong was a comical character, vastly different from the serious demeanor of King Kong. They also pointed out that Donkey Kong was a monkey, while King Kong was a gorilla. Universal Studios countered the arguments before the judge once again brought his gavel down on the table. After some time, the moment arrived for the presentation of evidence. Both sides submitted their evidence to the jury, which included video clips from the King Kong film and the Donkey Kong video game. Several hours passed in the courtroom, and at the end of the proceedings, both sides moved for a directed verdict. A directed verdict is a ruling by the judge indicating that the evidence presented is so overwhelmingly in favor of one party that the jury must return a verdict for that side. However, the judge denied both motions, asserting that there was enough evidence for the jury to make a decision. Following this, Universal Studios' team was noticeably disheartened as they failed to gain the upper hand in the proceedings. Oreo Masayoshi felt relieved that they had effectively defended against Universal Studios' accusations. Tora U.S. Headquarters. Luther and the executives had been observing the trial for some time and expressed disappointment when the result was announced. Luther sighed in frustration, remarking, "What a shame, they managed to get through the first day of the trial." One of the executives responded, "There's still more of the trial to come, so Kishin isn't entirely out of the woods." Another executive added, "I was hoping Universal Studios would win, though." Luther and the other executives nodded in agreement, but simultaneously, they noticed that Universal Studios hadn't gained the advantage, making their chances of winning considerably lower. Suzuki Trademark Entertainment. Seiki and Chiko were in the office together when they learned of the result of the first trial between Universal Studios and Kishin. Seiki expressed disappointment, saying, "This is truly unfortunate." Chiko offered a wry chuckle, remarking, "The trial is ongoing, so I wouldn't say Kishin is entirely in the clear just yet." Seiki sighed, stating, "Indeed, but at this moment, it seems the scales have tipped in Kishin's favor." Chiko simply sighed in response. Toshima Ward, Tokyo, Japan. Shin and Myra received the news of the result, and Myra couldn't contain her joy. Shin couldn't help but smile as he once again found the irony in the situation. Their legal representative in the trial against Universal Studios bore the name Joseph Kirby. "I had somewhat overlooked that video game, but this Universal Studios lawsuit has brought it back to my attention. Not to mention, it seems like the world is urging me to produce that video game, considering our legal representative is named Joseph Kirby," Shin thought with a smile, murmuring to himself, "Is this fate?" Simultaneously, as he contemplated producing a Kirby video game, Shin realized the importance of acquiring studios to recreate the successful films from his previous life. Although he had some reservations, the decision to do so became clear to him when Universal Studios initiated a lawsuit against his company. In response, Shin believed it was only fitting to engage in direct competition with that company in the realm of films and movies. Chapter 128, Preparing to Enter the Film Industry. New York, USA. The trial involving Universal Studios and Kishin extended until August 15, 1991, resulting in disappointment of Kishin's competitors. The court and the judge sided with Kishin, leading to the dismissal of Universal Studios' lawsuit against them. Not only that, Universal Studios compensated Kishin for the damages it had caused, providing them with a substantial sum of at least $1.4 million. This outcome left Kishin's competitors, including Tora and Suzuki brothers like Chiko and Seiki, visibly disheartened. Meanwhile, Oreo Masayoshi expressed his gratitude to Joseph Kirby, and Shin himself traveled from Tokyo, Japan to New York, USA, to meet with Joseph Kirby in person. Kishin U.S. Headquarters. While Oreo Masayoshi and Joseph Kirby were engaged in conversation, Oreo's phone suddenly beeped. He answered it and realized it was his boss on the other end. After a brief conversation, Oreo nodded and discreetly placed his phone in his pocket. Turning to Joseph Kirby, he said, if you'll excuse me, Mr. Kirby, I'll be back." Joseph Kirby acknowledged with a nod, and Oreo exited the room. As Oreo stepped out of the building, he noticed a taxi pulling up in front of him. A person in a sharp black suit emerged from the taxi, and Oreo recognized him as Shin. Oreo Masayoshi quickly approached Shin, and the two engaged in a conversation. After some discussion, they both decided to re-enter the building. A short while later, Shin and Oreo Masayoshi joined the room where Joseph Kirby was present. Upon seeing the foreign man, Shin identified him as Joseph Kirby, thanks to Oreo Masayoshi's introduction. Joseph Kirby rose from his seat as Shin approached with a warm smile. Shin extended his hand for a handshake and expressed his gratitude, saying, "Mr. Kirby, I truly appreciate your assistance in defending Kishin in court." Joseph Kirby, though somewhat perplexed, extended his hand to greet Shin, and they shared a handshake, despite Joseph's lingering confusion. Observing Joseph's confusion, Shin introduced himself, saying, "I'm Shinro Suzuki, the founder and owner of Kishin Company." Joseph Kirby was taken aback by this revelation and offered a warm greeting, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Suzuki." Shin smiled, and they both took their seats as they began their conversation. After a while, Shin proposed with a smile, "Mr. Kirby, as a token of our gratitude, we're considering naming a video game after your family name, Kirby. What do you think?" Oreo Masayoshi and Joseph Kirby were taken by surprise upon hearing this. Joseph Kirby, someone who had recently developed an interest in video games, exclaimed with excitement, "Really?" His excitement surged as he envisioned a Kishin video game named after him. Shin smiled and nodded in response. He explained, "Certainly, we've already developed the video game, and it's set to be simultaneously released in Japan and the United States. I'm simply asking if you're comfortable with having the game named after Kirby, your family name." He paused and added, "Of course, we'll name it Kirby only if you're willing." Joseph Kirby eagerly nodded and enthusiastically replied, "Of course, I'd love to." Why wouldn't he agree? Not only would he have a video game bearing his name, but it would also provide him with potential popularity, essentially, free promotion. After seeing Joseph Kirby's agreement, Shin smiled and proceeded to share more details about the video game that was about to bear his name. After some time had passed, Shin saw Joseph Kirby off, leaving him and Oreo Masayoshi in the room. Shin then turned to Oreo and asked, "Do you know of any struggling film studios here in the USA?" Oreo Masayoshi was taken aback by Shin's question but responded, "I do know one, Ctto Pictures. They're currently facing financial difficulties due to overspending on films that didn't perform well at the box office." Shin was quite surprised and inquired further, "Isn't that the studio that produced some successful films?" Oreo Masayoshi nodded and clarified, "Yes, that's correct. Currently, there are even rumors circulating that they're considering selling their distribution arm to MCA or Universal Studio for $100 million, although it's only a rumor at this point." Shin nodded thoughtfully and remarked, "I see." As he spoke, his mind wandered to the idea of acquiring Ctto Pictures. He realized that acquiring the company wouldn't be as straightforward as obtaining an anime studio. Ctto Pictures was already a significant presence in Hollywood, with an extensive distribution network. To secure such a company, he'd likely need hundreds of millions of USD, which he couldn't afford to spend at the moment. However, he considered the alternative of establishing a new film studio under Kishin's name to produce films. The challenge here was the absence of a distribution network in the film industry. To address this, he would likely need to partner with a larger studio to distribute the films created by his new company. Shin turned to Oreo Masayoshi and instructed, "Create a new company under Kishin's banner focused on the film industry." Oreo Masayoshi was taken aback and exclaimed in surprise, "You want to start a film studio?" Shin nodded with a determined smile and explained, "This is our way of competing with Universal Studios. If they think it's over, they're mistaken." I'll establish a film studio to produce films and challenge them. Oryo Masayoshi was taken aback, and he expressed his uncertainty, saying, "But we have no experience in film production. Attempting to retaliate with a medium we lack expertise in might result in financial losses." Shin smiled and nodded, letting out a chuckle. He responded, "You're correct, we lack experience. However, we can recruit emerging talents to assist us in producing films." Despite this suggestion, Oryo Masayoshi remained unsure and added, "Even with that, we might not be able to compete with Universal Studios in the film industry." Shin nodded with a confident smile and revealed, "You may be right, but I have a secret weapon I haven't disclosed yet." This secret weapon was the remarkable ability to recall his past life's memories. Shin couldn't explain why, but he retained vivid memories from his previous life. Some details remained forgotten, like the Kirby video game, but they often resurfaced in his mind. Even without the Universal Studios lawsuit, Shin knew that with time, he'd remember these details and reproduce them in this world for people to enjoy. There were still numerous untouched and outstanding video games from his past life that he hadn't yet introduced to this world. When he did, it would undoubtedly bring joy and satisfaction to the emerging community of video game players in this world. Chapter 129, News. USA. As various media outlets featured the news about Universal Studios' lawsuits against Kishin, many video game players tuned in because Kishin was slowly gaining and establishing its presence in the United States. When the trial's result was revealed, many of the video game players who were already becoming fans of Kishin felt visibly relieved. Meanwhile, with the release of the trial's result, even more people got to know about Kishin, especially the video game called Donkey Kong. Sales of the controversial video game Donkey Kong soared, and because of that, it gained unprecedented popularity. Many people flocked to various stores and malls in the States to purchase Donkey Kong. While playing Donkey Kong, people realized that the character they were controlling was almost the same as the one in the video game Super Mario Bros. And as a result, the video game Super Mario Bros. Was also experiencing a noticeable surge in popularity in the United States. In fact, due to the charming gameplay of Super Mario, it was outselling Donkey Kong, which had been the center of attention in recent days. Tora U.S. Headquarters. Luther Toole, the president of Tora, convened a meeting to discuss how to compete with Kishin's video games. He brought together the game developers from the video game development department. Terry Carter, the creative director, eagerly presented their newly created video game to the president and the executives. With excitement, Terry Carter introduced the game, saying, "This video game is a blend of puzzles and adventure. It's called Maria's World. The storyline follows a young girl lost in the woods, and her quest to find her way home. To do so, she must navigate through the forest, solving puzzles as she progresses." He paused, wearing a confident smile. The gameplay involves guiding the young girl through various levels and solving puzzles along the way. As he spoke, gameplay footage from the video game was projected onto a whiteboard. The president of Tora US and the executives observed as Terry Carter unveiled their latest creation. The video game footage was showcased, and President Luther, along with the executives, recognized similarities to Super Mario Bros. And Metroid. In one scene involving puzzle solving, the young girl character arranged various object shapes into a gate, matching them with the various shapes needed to open it. President Luther and the executives nodded in approval as they witnessed the gameplay. President Luther exclaimed, "This is indeed an intriguing video game." He expressed this, though he acknowledged that the game developed by their team, under the confident leadership of Terry Carter, still had a long way to go when compared to Super Mario Bros. Or Metroid, as well as some of the top Kishin video games. Nevertheless, he considered it a significant breakthrough for their game developers, as it was, at the very least, an entertaining video game. The other executives shared similar sentiments but refrained from discouraging their currently confident video game developers. They recognized that discouragement might lead to the creation of more subpar video games over time, which was undesirable. Meanwhile, Suzuki was determined not to be outdone and had their game developers working on a video game to compete with Kishin's Street Fighter. The only distinction was that Suzuki chose to emulate Kishin's Street Fighter. This new video game was named Legendary Battle, and it closely resembled Street Fighter, except for different character designs. Tokyo's video game players took notice of this, and most of them expressed dislike for Legendary Battle due to its lack of originality. Meanwhile, in Shin, a film studio named Kishin Pictures was established. It aimed to produce films that had been wildly popular in Shin's previous life. Since the company was newly created, it had only a few employees. Shin recruited recently graduated young individuals with expertise in film production and hired professionals from the film industry who were seeking employment. Unbeknownst to Shin, within days of the creation of his film studio company, the news reached the media, and some media outlets featured stories about Kishin's intention to venture into the film industry. This sparked discussions among movie enthusiasts. A video game company planning to step into the film industry? Is this some kind of joke? A man watching the news scoffed. The guy beside him joined in, saying, "Seems like they're throwing away their money." "Absolutely," another person chimed in. "Why would they even want to enter the film industry?" Someone asked, and the group just shrugged in bewilderment. "They're doing exceptionally well in the video game industry. In fact, they're estimated to have surpassed Tora and are right behind Suzuki in terms of sales and brand presence," a blonde individual mentioned with a chuckle. Meanwhile, one of the major 6 film studios, Universal Studio, had a hunch about why Kishin might be venturing into the film industry. Universal City, CA, USA. Universal Studio Headquarters. CEO's Office. The CEO of Universal Studio, Sean Maynard, had just learned about Kishin's plans to enter the film industry and couldn't help but chuckle. The second-ranking official at Universal Studio, President Michael Goldman, remarked with a smile, "Would you look at that? Is this their way of seeking revenge for the lawsuit?" CEO Sean Maynard responded with a smile, "Perhaps." He paused and continued, "But we can't be entirely certain about their intentions." With a faint smile, he added, "However, I'm confident they'll come to regret entering an industry where they lack expertise." President Michael Goldman chuckled and said, "Haha, I still believe they haven't moved past the lawsuit and want to face us directly." He paused and added, "But that's just my intuition. Either way, Kishin will soon realize that rushing into an unfamiliar industry will lead to significant losses." CEO Sean Maynard managed a faint smile, but deep down, he still harbored a sense of unease for losing the lawsuit against Kishin and having to pay compensation. However, the news of Kishin's abrupt foray into the film industry lifted his spirits. In his view, Kishin's hasty entry into this new industry seemed like a rather imprudent move, perhaps even deserving the title of the year's most questionable decision. Chapter 130, Film Project. Kishin U.S. Headquarters. Meanwhile, Shin, having heard the opinions of the media and the public through Oreo Masayoshi, flashed a faint smile. "It doesn't matter whether they'll like it or not. For now, I've already written the movie idea for our film studio to produce," Shin said, clasping his hands as his elbow rested upon the desk. Oreo Masayoshi was a bit surprised and inquired, "Oh? Can I know what it is?" Shin smiled and replied, "It's about dinosaurs." Oreo Masayoshi furrowed his brows upon hearing that and thought, "About dinosaurs?" Though Oreo Masayoshi was kind of confused, he didn't ask any further questions. Then Shin continued, "We should start scouting for talent, especially a film director for my project." He paused and handed the film project paper to Oreo Masayoshi, saying, "Also, please initiate the registration for the copyright of this script, and after that, submit it to the WGA, Writers Guild of America, and DGA, Directors Guild of America. Oryo Masayoshi received the papers and nodded as he examined the film project closely. On the cover, a title was prominently displayed, Jurassic Park. Shin couldn't help but smile when he saw Oryo Masayoshi's reaction. His choice to produce Jurassic Park stemmed from two primary reasons. Firstly, there was no Jurassic Park novel in this world, and secondly, this film had been a blockbuster in his previous life. Several days had passed since Shin entrusted Oryo Masayoshi with the film project. Meanwhile, on a certain street in California, a man in his 50s named Steven Spielberg aspired to become a great director. In his 20s, he directed his first film titled Duel and went on to direct various other movies, such as Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and more. Steven Spielberg had harbored dreams of becoming a renowned director since his youth. At the age of 12, he took the initiative to direct a 40-minute film, enlisting a classmate as his casts. The film, focused on a war theme, was shot using his dad's camera, and to his delight, it went on to win an award. As he settled into a public chair positioned on the sidewalk, Steven Spielberg noticed a flyer lying on the seat, prompting him to reach out and inspect it with curiosity. Examining the contents, Steven came across the words Kishin Pictures, and the flyer detailed opportunities for either hiring individuals or collaborating with a director. While his curiosity piqued, his phone suddenly beeped, grabbing Steven Spielberg's attention. Glancing at the screen, he saw it was his agent calling, so he answered, "What's up?" His agent, Matthias Carlson, on the other end of the line, spoke, "Steven, I've secured 2 projects from the DGA, and one of them might pique your interest, given your penchant for directing intriguing films with fresh concept ideas." Steven Spielberg was taken aback by this revelation and inquired, "Oh? What is it?" Matthias Carlson continued speaking on the other end of the phone, "Let me start with the first one. The initial film project is a fairly conventional story about a young boy who gets kidnapped and eventually turns the tables by eliminating his kidnapper." Steven Spielberg rubbed his chin thoughtfully and remarked, "It could make for an interesting movie if executed well." He paused and inquired, "What about the other one?" Matthias Carlson chuckled upon hearing this and replied, "The next project is the one that might truly ignite your interest." His voice carried a hint of suspense. Curious, Steven Spielberg furrowed his brows and asked, "Oh? Then don't keep me in suspense any longer. Tell me about it." Matthias Carlson, still on the other end of the line, chuckled and said, "Hee hee, this film project is part of the newly established Kishin Pictures. Its parent company was originally focused on video games." There was a teasing undertone in his voice, perhaps teasing Steven Spielberg or poking fun at Kishin's daring venture into an unfamiliar industry. Steven Spielberg frowned and urged, "I understand that. Just tell me the concept of the film already." Matthias Carlson, on the other end of the phone, sighed in exasperation at Steven Spielberg's impatience. He relented and said, All right. Pausing briefly and realizing he had to share the concept before Steven grew annoyed, he continued in a rush, "It's about a remote island where a wealthy entrepreneur establishes a theme park. This tycoon uses genetic engineering to resurrect dinosaurs as an attraction for his island park. Initially, these revived dinosaurs are kept safely enclosed, but later, chaos erupts as the dinosaurs break free from their enclosures and..." Before he could finish his explanation, Steven Spielberg abruptly interrupted, exclaiming, "Stop!" His eyes widened in amazement. Matthias Carlson assumed Steven Spielberg didn't like the film project, so he sighed with a hint of pity and said, "I knew it. You wouldn't like it. I thought it was rather intriguing too." Steven Spielberg, who heard this, simply chuckled and replied, "What are you talking about? That concept is incredibly fascinating." Matthias Carlson, on the other end of the phone, furrowed his brows and inquired, "Then why did you tell me to stop?" Steven Spielberg chuckled and replied, "I told you to stop because you were talking too fast." Pausing for a moment, he added with a chuckle, "Are you channeling your inner 2PAC or something?" Matthias Carlsen, upon hearing this, simply chuckled wryly, acknowledging his enthusiasm, and then asked Steven Spielberg, "So, what do you think? Do you like it?" Steven Spielberg nodded eagerly and said, "Of course, I like it. Contact Kishin Pictures right away and secure me as the director for this particular film project." Matthias Carlsen on the other end of the phone agreed, all right," and then ended the call. As the call concluded, Steven Spielberg looked at the Kishin Pictures flyers in his hand. He stroked his chin with his other hand and mused, "Kishin Pictures? Interesting." He couldn't help but feel a faint excitement at the prospect of directing such a compelling film project that Kishin Pictures had just brought to his attention. Meanwhile, in Japan, the Dragon Ball manga series achieved rapid success, quickly garnering the attention of various Nippon TV executives. Nippon TV even reached out to the author with the idea of adapting the manga into an anime, hoping to compete with Pokémon. However, various scandals involving the collaboration between Tora and Nippon TV resulted in the project coming to a standstill. Tora and Nippon TV were brainstorming ways to compete with Pokémon that had no connection to Kishin Pokémon. As Nippon TV contacted Kira Toriyama, they were left disappointed, realizing that Dragon Ball was also influenced by Kishin. In response to this, the CEO of Nippon TV, Akimitsuo Ishizawa, frustratedly ran his hand through his messy hair, thinking, "Kishin, can't you provide us with some exclusive business opportunities already?" The Dragon Ball manga series had already gained popularity due to its humor, unique art style, and captivating storyline. Chapter 131, Criticism. Park Avenue, Manhattan, New York, USA. Kishin Pictures. Kishin Pictures was located at 181 Broadway on Park Avenue. This is where Shin established his small studio, which he purchased from a struggling company. While Shin didn't acquire the entire building, he did secure all 3 floors for Kishin Pictures. Shin was responsible for evaluating the audition performances of actors and actresses. Beside him was Oryo Masayoshi. Several executives from Kishin Entertainment and individuals from the film industry, eager to collaborate with Kishin Pictures, were also present. Shin and the others discussed the auditioned candidates' performances, but the final decision rested with Shin, as he carefully considered their input. Subsequently, Oryo Masayoshi's phone beeped, and he excused himself from Shin and the others. After the phone call, Oryo Masayoshi returned to Shin, brimming with excitement to deliver the good news. Shin beamed with delight and inquired, "Who is the director interested in helming our movie?" Oryo Masayoshi scratched the back of his head as he recollected and then revealed, "The director's name is Steven Spielberg." Shin, upon hearing this news, was pleasantly surprised. Upon hearing Steven instead of Steven, he mused that perhaps this world had an alternative version of Steven Spielberg. With a smile, he turned to Oryo Masayoshi and said, "I'm about to return to Japan, but I'll be back. Make sure to treat that director well, all right?" He paused, noticing the confusion on Oryo Masayoshi's face, and added, "In fact, you should treat everyone well." Oryo Masayoshi scratched the back of his head, nodding, and replied, All right." Even though he didn't quite understand why Shin emphasized this, he still nodded and agreed. Kindness was a virtue he held dear, and besides, he thought, he's Japanese, after all. Meanwhile, Shin couldn't help but think that a film like Jurassic Park would require CGI, and he was grateful that this world was at least as advanced as 1993 compared to his previous life's world, albeit with some differences. In this world, CGI was still a relatively new concept, even for the film industry itself. One of the driving reasons that led Shin to enter the film industry was his hope of uncovering new innovations within it, like the motion capture technology he was eager to explore. Though this technology was already established in the industry, it was somewhat downplayed due to its high cost and technical intricacies. However, Shin foresaw the potential of this underappreciated technology in the film industry for his future video games. Entering and venturing into the film industry provided Shin with the means for his company to develop the necessary technology, which he could later utilize in his video games. Meanwhile, as Shin dedicated himself to the Jurassic Park film project alongside his newfound partners in the industry, the news of Kishin, the electronic and video game-focused company, preparing to create a film didn't go unnoticed in Hollywood. One of the critique companies, Script Shark, took a harsh stance when criticizing the script of Jurassic Park. They argued, it's too chaotic and far too unrealistic. Granted, the film industry is no stranger to being unrealistic, but resurrected dinosaurs causing mayhem? What a ludicrous and uninspired plot! It boils down to dinosaurs just killing people, offering little in terms of substance. On the other hand, one of the most influential critics in Hollywood, the Tribeca Film Institute, provided a more balanced assessment of the Jurassic Park script. While they did offer some constructive criticism, their primary focus was on highlighting the substantial financial investment Kishin might need for such an ambitious film project. Even though the internet wasn't particularly popular during this period, and few were eager to browse due to its sluggish speed, the news of Kishin, an electronic and video game-focused company preparing to venture into the film industry, reached many ears. This development sparked a heated debate among video game enthusiasts and film aficionados. Video game fans who had become supporters of Kishin staunchly defended the company, while film enthusiasts criticized Kishin for what they perceived as underestimating the film industry. Kishin seems to be underestimating the film industry, one film enthusiast remarked to his friends. Yet, they're being too audacious by entering the film industry, another friend agreed. However, one of their friends, a video game enthusiast, chimed in, "What's wrong with trying to enter the film industry? Anyone can attempt it, right? Look at Tora and Suzuki, who have already established themselves in the industry as well." In response, his friend let out a derisive snort and replied, "Are you seriously comparing fledgling Kishin to such massive companies? Think about it, bro. Kishin is nowhere near the same league as those companies." However, another friend who was also a Kishin fan chimed in, "Not close? They've already produced a slew of great songs that all of you are constantly listening to, and you're still overly critical of Kishin." Upon hearing this, their friends who were film enthusiasts felt a tad embarrassed. After all, they did listen to Kishin's music quite frequently. One of them even had a fondness for the Japanese song Sukiyaki. In an attempt to diffuse the tension, one of them pointed out, "Film and music are fundamentally different, all right." With that, the group of friends found themselves embroiled in a heated debate, clearly divided into two opposing camps. If Shin were to learn that this situation was occurring in some parts of America, he would undoubtedly find it unbelievable. After all, who would have thought that people would invest so much time in arguing and passionately defending the brands they are partial to? Meanwhile, in Tokyo, Japan, Kishin once again launched a new video game. People all across Japan flocked to numerous stores and malls in eager anticipation of purchasing the latest video game release. It was named Kirby. When Kishin's fans first laid eyes on the drawing of Kirby, they initially mistook the pink, round creature for a Pokémon, to be honest. After all, Pokémon had already gained undeniable popularity, not only in Japan but also in South Korea, Taiwan, and various Southeast Asian regions where it was widely recognized. Kishin had indeed put significant effort into making their franchise as popular as possible. It became so popular that even Tora and Suzuki couldn't ignore it any longer and were already devising strategies to compete with Kishin's franchise. However, Tora faced some setbacks, while Suzuki was busy brainstorming their own unique ideas. They knew they couldn't mimic Pokémon, especially after witnessing Tora's experiences. Chapter 132, Kirby's Adventure. Tokyo, Japan. In the hidden hangout of Sawa Arata and his group in Tokyo, Japan. Sawa Arata had just acquired Kishin's latest video game, Kirby's Adventure. He perused the story manual, featuring an adorable pink creature on the cover. Sawa Arata examined the game cartridge, inserted it into the Famicom, and was greeted with a surprise. The introduction to Kirby's Adventure displayed on the screen with a white background, accompanied by a message, "First, draw a circle." The scene showcased a perfectly drawn circle before the text continued, then, dot the eyes, illustrating the creation of eyes. Subsequently, it instructed, add a great big smile, and proceeded to draw the feet and ears, saying, and presto, it's Kirby. The drawing transformed into a vibrant main menu, featuring Kirby, the pink character, in the center. "It seems too girly," one of Sawa Arata's friends, Fukuda Hideo, commented as he observed the television screen. "I don't think so, it's visually pleasing," another of Sawa Arata's friends remarked. The group of friends engaged in a discussion about the game's visuals at the outset. "Well, let's dive into the gameplay," Sawa Arata suggested, initiating the game. The television screen transitioned to the loading screen, revealing the stage name, Level 1, Vegetable Valley. A lively animation of Kirby wielding a sword played inside the box, with Kirby's Adventure displayed in the bottom right corner. The background surrounding the animation was adorned with pink hues and stars. During the animated battle where Kirby fought with his sword, the blade was deflected by a pesky enemy, ultimately getting lodged into the title display of Kirby's Adventure in the lower right corner. Kirby, the spherical character, appeared visibly surprised and opted to swallow the enemy after losing his sword. Following this, the scene transitioned, showing Kirby floating downwards accompanied by a shining yellow star before eventually touching down. Sawa Arata and his friends noticed a door labeled with A1 above it. Sawa Arata attempted to guide Kirby through the door by pressing the up button, but Kirby ended up moving in the opposite direction. Sawa Arata exclaimed, "Oops, let's try that again." Subsequently, Kirby descended as Sawa Arata managed to lead him through the door, triggering a scene change. The gameplay proved engaging, reminiscent of titles like Super Mario Bros. 2 or 3, but it offered a distinct and unique experience. Kirby, the circular character, possessed the ability to engulf enemies. In just the first level, Sawa Arata succeeded in absorbing the abilities of the enemy, granting Kirby the power to emit sparks. As Sawa Arata progressed through and successfully completed Stage 1, Level 1, Kirby, holding a flag, returned to the door marked with 1. Kirby firmly planted the flag into the ground, causing the background to tremble, and a new level materialized. Sawa Arata attempted to enter the door with a star, prompting an introductory message, "Crane Fever." Just below it, in the same box, another message read, "Use the button to manipulate the crane and attempt to grab a Kirby. Big ones are challenging but worth it." Following this, the scene transformed into a crane machine filled with Kirby figurines, including a notably large one, which was placed inside the machine. Sawa Arata realized that he could control the crane using the A button. He pressed A, causing the crane to move, and then released it when it aligned with the big Kirby's position. The crane successfully grasped the oversized Kirby, but it slipped from its grip. Sawa Arata's friends chuckled, with one of them remarking, "Hee hee, look at that, it was quite realistic." "Ha ha ha!" echoed the laughter of his friends. Sawa Arata offered a confident smile and made another attempt. This time, he successfully captured the large Kirby figurine, and it remained firmly in the crane's grip. Beneath the label bonus, a big Kirby symbol appeared, signifying a 2 UP reward. As Sawa Arata progressed through the levels, he realized that the gameplay of Kirby's Adventure was notably more user-friendly in comparison to titles like Kid Icarus or Metroid. In fact, Sawa Arata and his friends couldn't help but be reminded of Super Mario Bros. As they delved into Kirby's Adventure, although it still possessed a unique gameplay style distinct from other Kishin video games. When Sawa Arata's Kirby character collided with an enemy, it lost the ability it had absorbed in Level 1. Undeterred, Sawa Arata continued to play and subsequently acquired the power to throw a boomerang, similar to the cutter ability. Sawa Arata thoroughly enjoyed the gameplay until he encountered the boss. Overconfident due to the game's simplicity, he believed he could swallow the boss with his Kirby character. Instead, Kirby collided with the boss, failing to swallow it, and consequently losing the ability to throw a boomerang, leaving him defenseless and resulting in a game over. Well, it appears there's no way to attack a boss unless Kirby retains an ability from a specific enemy it's consumed, Sawa Arata remarked with a smile. Fukuda Hideo nodded in agreement and added, I imagine it will be quite popular among casual gamers at school. One of their friends chimed in, that's true. Another friend mused, I suppose we don't need to provide gameplay instructions since it's already quite straightforward. However, another friend disagreed, remarking, we can't claim it's entirely easy just yet. It might be a good idea to play it more to get a better understanding. Sawa Arata nodded in agreement and added, even if it does seem too simple, there's no harm in providing a detailed guide to the gameplay and the game as a whole for beginners. The group of friends collectively agreed with this notion. In truth, they were quite dedicated to researching Kishin's video games and various independent titles, including those of Tora and Suzuki. They had been contracted by manga publishing companies like Shonen Jump to produce content related to video games, given their rising popularity among young people. As a result, Shonen Jump saw increased sales. Due to their success, Sawa Arata and his friends were now able to afford a modest car. When they arrived at school in their car, their classmates were astonished, and even the teachers were wide-eyed with surprise. The previously troublesome students had transformed into stars, and even the principal praised Sawa Arata and his friends' parents for their success. Chapter 133, Joseph Kirby's Rose to Reputation. New York, United States. On October 5, 1991, Kirby's Adventure was released in both Japan and the United States. In the United States, many people had already seen the commercial for Kishin's Kirby's Adventure on television. Among them was Joseph Kirby, who was currently in his office. As he watched the advertisement, he grew increasingly excited and planned to head to a store to purchase the video game cartridge. However, to his surprise, Kishin itself delivered a package to him, and it was his assistant who brought it to his office. As Joseph Kirby had anticipated, the package contained a chess console designed in the style of Kirby's Adventure, and the controller also featured the same thematic design. As Joseph examined the video game console, he was thoroughly impressed, particularly with the prominent Kirby's Adventure title on the chess case. His assistant, a young man named Isaac Ball, observed the video game console and the uniquely designed video game cartridges that accompanied it. He exclaimed, I'm quite envious, sir. My son is also a fan of Kishin video games, and it's evident that Kishin put a lot of effort into gifting you such a distinctive and well-designed package. Joseph Kirby responded with a bright smile and promptly connected the case to the television. He inserted the Kirby's Adventure video game cartridge into the case slot. As the case powered on, Kishin's logo flashed on the television screen, followed by the captivating introduction to Kirby's Adventure. Isaac Ball observed the scene with a smile and couldn't help but comment, wow, they even crafted such an impressive introduction for the video game named after your family name, sir. Joseph Kirby responded with a grin, chuckling softly, hee hee. Following this, he delved into playing Kirby's Adventure and thoroughly enjoyed both the video game and its gameplay. Do you see this, Isaac? This is a video game named after me. Joseph Kirby exclaimed proudly, his eyes glistening with slight tears. Isaac Ball, witnessing his esteemed senior partner's emotional moment, simply nodded and said, indeed, sir. He found himself drawn to the captivating art style of Kirby's Adventure and couldn't resist the desire to play, despite not having had the opportunity to experience a Kes or Kishin's video games, even though he had purchased one for his child. As Joseph Kirby continued to play, the door to his office suddenly swung open, revealing Christian Foley, the managing partner of their law firm. In response to this situation, Isaac Ball subtly gestured to Joseph Kirby, who was unaware of Christian Foley's presence. However, Christian Foley discerned Isaac Ball's intent and warmly smiled as he remarked, "Don't worry, I don't mind if Mr. Kirby is enjoying video games in his workspace." Joseph Kirby finally noticed Christian Foley's presence and momentarily contemplated stopping his gaming. However, Christian Foley saw this and maintained his pleasant smile. Taking a seat beside Joseph Kirby, Christian Foley reassured them, "Don't worry, I won't interrupt your gaming, especially when you both don't have a project at the moment." He paused and added, "Besides, Joseph Kirby, our senior partner, deserves to celebrate. After all, a Kishin video game bears his name." His tone carried a touch of envy and longing. Christian Foley couldn't help but think about his grandson's fondness for Kishin video games, and he imagined how surprised the young boy would be if there were a video game named after their family name. Joseph Kirby and Isaac Ball exchanged glances and breathed sighs of relief. Joseph Kirby then proceeded to share the details of the video game with their managing partner, Christian Foley. Christian Foley nodded attentively while watching Joseph Kirby play Kirby's Adventure. However, as he observed the game, he couldn't help but ponder what it would be like if he were the one leading the defense and representing Kishin in court. He mused about the possibility of a video game bearing his family name, becoming Foley's Adventure. If Shin were aware of Christian Foley's thoughts, he would likely chuckle and laugh. In the meantime, Kirby's Adventure was gradually gaining recognition among Americans in recent days. Media outlets began to uncover the history behind the Kirby's Adventure title. Various media outlets, including cable news channel CNN and television networks such as ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, and PBS, reported on it. On Fox News, a dashing news anchor, dressed in a formal black suit and a striking bow tie, announced, "A new Kishin video game is rapidly gaining popularity among the youth of America, but have you ever wondered about the history of this video game and the origin of the name Kirby?" With a charming smile, he paused and continued, "Let's find out if kids in a certain New York store are familiar with it, with the help of Jim Reels." The scene then transitioned to a man standing in front of a camera, and as he began speaking, it shifted to footage of him interviewing a young customer purchasing a Kishin video game. Jim Reels inquired of the blonde Caucasian child, "Have you ever delved into the history of Kirby's Adventure video game and wondered where the name Kirby came from?" The blonde Caucasian kid shook his head and remarked, "Why would I even want to know that?" His black-haired friend chimed in, saying, "Exactly. We just want to play video games. Why bother with all this stuff?" Jim Reels, the interviewer, found himself in a slightly awkward situation, and viewers at home couldn't help but chuckle and laugh at the interaction. Jim Reels, however, persisted and stated, "Did you know that the name Kirby was actually derived from a lawyer in the USA who represented Kishin in a lawsuit against Universal Studios?" Both kids, the blonde Caucasian and his black-haired friend, appeared visibly surprised. This surprising tidbit of information also astonished viewers at home who had played or heard about the video game Kirby's Adventure. Jim Reels proceeded to interview more kids in the store and various locations around New York before returning to the camera, where he stood ready to continue his report. Following Jim Reels' segment, the scene shifted back to the news anchor. With a smile, he declared, "That's right, folks. This video game, Kirby's Adventure, and the name Kirby were inspired by the lawyer's family name, Joseph Kirby, who works at the Mudge Rose Guthrie Alexander and Furden law firm." He went on to provide more details about Joseph Kirby, introducing him to the audience. Many individuals in need of legal representation came to regard Joseph Kirby as a capable lawyer after learning about him. Chapter 134, Kishin Merchandise to USA? New York, USA. As an increasing number of people in the United States began to discover that Kishin's video games were far more captivating than any of Tora and Suzuki's offerings, despite their inferior systems, Kishin's sales steadily ascended. It was even estimated that Kishin had already surpassed Tora's sales on its own, leaving both competitors, Tora and Suzuki, struggling with sluggish sales. Tora Electronics U.S. headquarters. President Luther and his team were filled with concern, and in response to their worries, they decided to introduce Maria's World to the market. President Luther declared, "We must promptly release the video game Maria's World to compete with Kishin's video games, or we risk losing the battle." The executives concurred, and one of them added, "Indeed, to achieve this, we need to accelerate its production while slightly reducing the production of other products." The executives all nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Suzuki Electronics US also reached the same conclusion. However, Suzuki was at a disadvantage in the USA due to their attempts to imitate Kishin's video games while failing to capture people's attention. Many people in the United States were also beginning to realize that the Tora and Suzuki companies had been deceiving them all along. Some Americans who had friends of Japanese or even Asian descent informed them that Kishin was the dominant force in Asia, having pioneered the industry in Japan. This revelation slowly started to circulate among the American population. Fortunately, both Tora and Suzuki had already firmly established themselves in the US market, even when video games weren't as popular as they are today. Tora Electronics and Suzuki Electronics offered a wide range of products, including motors, cars, appliances, and various other electronics. Suzuki, in particular, had products such as Suzuki phone models and even computers, although they were not on par with other computer brands in terms of performance and features. The fact that Kishin Electronics is merely a small company with a limited product range, primarily consisting of video game consoles and video games, and possesses relatively low global brand recognition, makes it more likely for people to lean towards the larger competitors. In reality, Kishin doesn't offer much beyond video games, except through its subsidiary companies like Kishin Entertainment and Kishin Pictures. This is the reason why a substantial number of consumers continued to prefer Tora and Suzuki video game consoles and games. These preferences were heavily influenced by the strong brand presence of these two companies and their established global reputation. As a result, many individuals were hesitant to accept claims that Kishin was the savior of the video game industry. As a result, a lively debate was underway in various parts of the USA, centering on the notion that Kishin might be the savior of the video game industry. "I heard from my father's friend, who has a Japanese acquaintance, that Kishin was the real pioneer in sparking worldwide interest in video games," one man excitedly shared with his group of friends. However, another friend, a staunch Suzuki supporter, countered by saying, "I'm not so sure about that. Why would a company that supposedly saved the video game industry only have a modest 8-bit system?" A fellow enthusiast of Tora products nodded in agreement, adding, "That's a valid point. The fact that Kishin only had an 8-bit system suggests they entered the scene later compared to Tora and Suzuki." On the other hand, someone who favored Kishin's video games chimed in, "Come on, guys. How can Kishin compete with these two industry giants from Japan when it comes to electronic research?" A man, who was also a Kishin enthusiast, supported his friend's comments, stating, "Kishin will inevitably fall short in terms of electronic quality because both Tora and Suzuki are well-established companies with extensive experience in electronic technology and well-equipped research teams, unlike Kishin." As the Tora and Suzuki supporters heard this, they attempted to counter the argument, leading the group's friendly debate to quickly devolve into a chaotic dispute. Parsippany Troy Hills, New Jersey, USA. Toys R Us headquarters. While opinions regarding Kishin, Tora, and Suzuki remained in constant contradiction, with people from both sides refusing to reach a consensus, Kishin merchandise quietly made its way into the USA market. The primary distributor of Kishin merchandise was Toys R Us. Eric Bradshaw, the CEO of Toys R Us, was genuinely thrilled about becoming the biggest distributor for Kishin's merchandise. He was also pleased that other retail giants like Target, Kmart, and Sears had yet to recognize the market potential of Kishin merchandise. Eric Bradshaw sat in his office, contemplating while examining a Lego set. He couldn't help but smile and exclaimed, "Those folks just can't see the potential in this toy, hee hee. But that's an advantage for me. I can largely dominate the profits alongside Kishin." He chuckled as he thought of Andrew, Celine, Joe, the CEOs of the major retail companies, who had underestimated the value of Lego. However, Eric Bradshaw was confident that they would soon regret their oversight. As he played with the Lego, he believed in its success. After all, not only did he enjoy it himself, but his grandchildren, his 16-year-old son, and many others in his family loved playing with Lego, constructing houses and various designs. This is why Eric Bradshaw recognized the potential of Lego and its ability to succeed in the USA market. When he was selected by the young founder of Kishin to distribute their toy products, Shinro provided Lego sets to each of the CEOs of major retail companies like Target, Kmart, and Sears, so they could witness the product firsthand. However, except for Eric Bradshaw, the others failed to see the potential of Lego. Eric Bradshaw, recognizing the opportunity, extended a favorable and mutually beneficial contract to Kishin, making Toys R Us the largest distributor of Kishin merchandise, particularly for Lego products. To secure this deal, he was even willing to relinquish some of the distribution rights for Kishin's video game consoles. When the CEOs of the major retail companies observed Eric Bradshaw's enthusiasm for Kishin merchandise, they didn't mind his desire for Toys R Us to be the leading distributor. For them, Kishin Electronics and Kishin's video game consoles and games were the focal point, given the revival of the video game industry. The popularity of video games was even spreading to other parts of Europe. In fact, Kishin had entered several European countries just 2 weeks after entering the USA market. Although Kishin was still striving to establish its name in some parts of the world, countries with promising markets like China and the Middle East had not yet fully embraced Kishin's products. China, due to historical resentment toward Japan, rejected Tora, Suzuki, and Kishin's video game products. As for the Middle East, Tora and Suzuki had already solidified their brands in various regions, while Kishin lagged behind in establishing distribution networks. Chapter 135, Taking the Market by the Storm. USA. While many players in the United States are slowly embracing video games, Kishin's merchandise products have finally been advertised on television. Even people who aren't fans of Kishin's video games have noticed the advertisement. Why? Well, it turns out that the toy on display caught their attention, sparking their curiosity about Kishin's Lego. In a particular household, Mark Brady, a 60-year-old Caucasian man who saw Kishin Entertainment's advertisement on television, was pleasantly surprised. He exclaimed, "It's so similar to the kiddies craft I used to have back in the UK." He fondly remembered his younger days when he built with toy bricks. As he watched the advertisement featuring children constructing various things like miniature houses, boats, and airplanes using Kishin's Lego, he was genuinely captivated by the scene alone. It genuinely piqued his interest, and one notable observation was that while Kishin's Lego resembled the brick toys of Kitty's Craft, which ultimately failed in the 1950s, Mark Brady noticed that Kishin's Lego, from the advertisement alone, appeared to be more versatile. The footage of children building miniature houses and various other creations gave the impression that with Kishin's Lego, only one's imagination was the limit. "I have to buy this," Mark Brady whispered with a sparkle in his eyes. With this decision, he was about to retrieve his wallet from his room when his 10-year-old grandson, Jordan, approached him. "Grandpa, could you buy me that Kishin's Lego?" exclaimed Jordan with excitement in his eyes. He had also seen the Kishin's merchandise advertisement and was completely captivated, especially by the toy Lego. Mark Brady exclaimed in surprise, "Oh, you want that toy?" Jordan immediately nodded in excitement and exclaimed, "Yes. I love building houses, boats, ships, roads, and airplanes too." Mark Brady, upon hearing this, was taken aback but smiled warmly. He said to his grandson, "I'll buy you one." Just wait here, and I'll get my wallet. Jordan was overjoyed and exclaimed, "Yay! Thank you, Grandpa." Mark Brady felt a sense of happiness seeing his grandson so joyful. Though he had originally planned to purchase Kishin's Lego, he felt his heart warm as he witnessed his grandson's happiness. He walked to his room, retrieved his wallet, and, along with his grandson, hopped in the car to drive to a Toys R Us store. Upon arrival, he noticed that many people were already inside the store, and the Lego sets were selling quickly. Growing anxious, Mark Brady rushed with his grandson to secure one. He managed to grab a set, but he had hoped to buy another, only to discover that the store had run out of stock. Still, Mark Brady was content that he could get one for his grandson. They headed home with a Lego set box featuring the Super Mario Bros. Design, a popular video game among children, as reported by various media outlets and advertisements. He had no doubts about its popularity. After all, he had first-hand experience with the company called Kishin through this Lego set box that sold out so quickly. Mark Brady, joined by his grandson, opened the Lego set box, neatly arranging the bricks. Afterward, they started building a house with the Lego pieces. Mark Brady was visibly delighted as he played with Lego alongside his grandson. Many people in the United States who were also in search of Lego were surprised to find that it was yet another product from the company that was making waves not only in the music and film industries but also in the slowly reviving video game industry. It was Kishin. A middle-aged man named Matt, who had watched the advertisement with his family, exclaimed, "It's Kishin again." Lila, his daughter, gasped in surprise as she said, "I really like their music." Matt's wife, Lily, chimed in with a chuckle, "Is this company even venturing into the toy industry now?" Matt smiled and replied, "Toys and video games are for children, after all, so it's no surprise that they would explore the toy industry as well." Lily smiled and agreed, "That's true." In just a few days after the release of Kishin's Lego, it took the USA market by storm. In fact, it became so massive and successful that it quickly outsold Kishin's video game consoles and video games, taking everyone in the business world, including Shin and Eric Bradshaw, by surprise. The CEOs of major retail companies like Target, Kmart, and Sears reached out to Shin, expressing their interest in expanding the distribution agreement for Kishin's merchandise. However, Shin politely informed them that Toys R Us had already secured the largest distribution rights for Kishin's products. The retail CEOs couldn't hide their disappointment, but they still smiled, knowing that their distribution of Kishin's KES and video games was rapidly gaining ground, overtaking Tora, the second largest player. Kishin were now on the verge of becoming the #1 video game company in the United States, and Suzuki felt the mounting pressure. Tora and Suzuki observed the success of Kishin's Lego in the United States and couldn't help but feel envious. In Tokyo, Japan, at Tora's headquarters, Chairman Asahi Tanaka has witnessed the success of Kishin's Lego and discussed with the board of directors a strategic plan to counter the significant impact Kishin has been making in foreign markets. One of the board members exclaimed upon seeing the success of Kishin's Lego, "This is unbelievable. The youngest son of Suzuki Group's chairman is exceptionally talented. Kishin is causing a significant disruption even in the toy industry." Another board member chimed in, "Indeed. They're involved in music, planning a rumored film, and now they're achieving tremendous success in the toy industry. Is Shinro Suzuki trying to dominate every facet of people's lives?" Other board members joined in with similar expressions of concern. Chairman Asahi Tanaka chuckled wryly as he recollected his past decisions. Then, shaking his head, he continued, "Sigh. I should have recognized this potential earlier." Pausing to address the board of directors, he said, "The innovation in Kishin's Lego toy is remarkable, and I missed it. All I saw was Kishin's Famicom and video games, focusing on the reviving industry as an empty canvas for profits. Now, I've missed out on a truly fascinating product, Kishin's Lego toy," he admitted without any embarrassment. The board of directors nodded in agreement, and one of them added, "I, too, overlooked the potential of Kishin's Lego, but now..." He trailed off with a regretful shake of his head. Other board members shared similar sentiments, admitting their oversight. Chairman Asahi Tanaka then offered a reassuring smile and said, "But it's not too late." Pausing to see the board members' smiles, he continued, "We can always create similar products to Kishin's Lego toys, just as we've done before." His tone had a touch of humor. The board of directors chuckled in response. However, they weren't the only ones with such thoughts. Even Suzuki was considering the same, and in fact, many foreign companies that had witnessed the success of Kishin's Lego in the United States were contemplating similar strategies. Chapter 136, Unexpected Rapid Expansion and Popularity. USA. Numerous media outlets highlighted the evident popularity of Kishin's Lego. Many children were overjoyed to be featured in interviews, proudly showcasing their Kishin's Lego sets, with exclamations like, "I can build my own plane with this." Another child enthusiastically proclaimed, "I can recreate Link's sword with these pieces. I'm going to create Super Mario with these," exclaimed various children as they shared their thoughts during live interviews with media channels that aimed their microphones at them. A CNN reporter then reported in front of the camera, "As you can see, this toy store is already drawing large crowds, thanks to the Kishin Lego craze." They presented the bustling lineup of people on the sidewalk, with the cameraman capturing the scene perfectly. With that, the CNN reporter addressed the astonished viewers who had perhaps underestimated the popularity of Kishin's Lego, stating, "As you can see, Kishin's Lego has gained tremendous popularity in several states of America, even raising concerns among authorities due to its widespread appeal." He paused briefly and added, "Many children were initially drawn to Kishin's video games, and now, they're captivating young minds with their toys." While the CNN reporter continued his coverage in front of the camera, a Fox News reporter was also on site, delivering a report. Kishin is gradually expanding into other industries beyond their primary focus on video games. Are we witnessing an ambitious company attempting to dominate various sectors? Questioned the Fox News reporter, expressing concern. However, viewers at home remained fixated on Kishin's Lego, showing little interest in the broader business ambitions of the company. The popularity of Kishin's Lego was unmistakable. Even professors from prestigious universities were attempting to acquire them. Those who had seen the Kishin's merchandise advertisements were undeniably intrigued, regardless of their IQ. Their sole motivation for purchasing Kishin's Lego was to bring their imaginative creations to life. Just about 2 weeks after the initial release of Kishin's Lego in the United States, the market demand exceeded even the expectations of Shin and Eric Bradshaw, with their stock dwindling rapidly. As a result of this, several retail companies selling Kishin's Lego reached out to the manufacturer, Kishin. Consequently, Reynold MacArthur, the president of Kishin Merchandise in the USA, contacted Shinro Suzuki, the CEO of Kishin's merchandise parent company, seeking advice and a decision. In response, Shin chose to secure a loan from major United States banks, which promptly extended their support, recognizing the steadily growing Kishin company. Why did Shin, who is currently worth $2.3 billion, decide to take out a loan? While his company is privately owned and his personal assets are intertwined with the funds of all his Kishin-related companies, the rapid surge in the popularity of Kishin's Lego meant that he might not have the time to mobilize his own capital for the expansion of his factories in various countries, particularly in Southeast Asia. This region offered lower costs and was an ideal choice for establishing new company factories, aside from China, where Kishin had not yet ventured. By obtaining a loan, his companies can swiftly access capital, meeting the market demand for Kishin's Lego promptly. Moreover, this allows Shin's personal wealth of $2.3 billion to be allocated to other endeavors and purposes. Taking a loan also enhances his company's credit rating, provided they can repay the debt in a timely manner. This, in turn, will facilitate easier access to borrowing in the future. Over time, as Shin's companies continue to borrow from major banks, these institutions may become more willing to offer lower interest rates due to the established creditworthiness of his enterprises. Considering all these factors, Shin has made the decision to borrow for the first time. Borrowing money can be beneficial for a business. In fact, it can be advantageous as long as the business maintains its prosperity. Unlike some nations, it is entirely acceptable to borrow funds as long as the process is free from corruption. Upon hearing Shinro Suzuki, the owner of all key Shin companies, Reynold MacArthur, along with the executives, proceeded to secure loans from several major banks in the United States, including Citicorp, Bank of America, and Chase Manhattan Corporation, all of which were eager to provide financial support. These banks recognized the potential of Kishin merchandise and perceived a significant opportunity. And indeed, this was their opportunity. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, Japan, Shin seemed entirely oblivious, or perhaps it had simply slipped his mind, but when the Japanese government learned that Kishin Electronics subsidiary, Kishin Merchandise, was borrowing money from various major banks in the USA, it left the Japanese government feeling uneasy. Why? It was undeniable that Kishin companies were establishing themselves as a globally significant entity, with the potential to even make it onto the Fortune Global 500 list despite being a private enterprise. Moreover, their brand presence in foreign markets was steadily taking root. However, this very progress was the reason behind the unease felt by the Japanese government regarding Kishin, a company with immense potential, borrowing from various major banks in the United States of America. There were several reasons for this unease. Firstly, if Japanese companies continued to borrow from various major U.S. banks, it would diminish the Japanese government's control over the financial sector, as these banks fell outside Japanese regulatory oversight. Secondly, if these Japanese companies borrowed extensively from U.S. banks and subsequently moved their capital out of Japan, it would result in capital flight, potentially weakening the Japanese economy and complicating economic management for the Japanese government. Most importantly, heavy reliance on U.S. banks for financing could undermine Japanese economic sovereignty. This is because the Japanese government would have limited ability to implement policies that might adversely affect the interests of U.S. banks. While the Japanese government and its officials were deeply concerned about Kishin's substantial borrowing from U.S. banks, Shin remained blissfully unaware, enjoying a meal with Myra at a 3-star Michelin restaurant. Myra smiled as she savored the A5 beef and remarked to Shin, "I was genuinely surprised by how popular Kishin's Lego has become in the United States." Upon hearing the news that the popularity of Kishin's Lego had prompted Shin to borrow money from U.S. banks, her astonishment was evident. Shin smiled and replied, "I was surprised as well." He chuckled and added, "The fact that it's even surpassing chess and video game sales was beyond my expectations too." The popularity of Kishin's Lego in the United States had reached Japan, and it was featured in the news. Consequently, the sales of Kishin's Lego in Japan gradually gained popularity as well. Undoubtedly, the USA, particularly for the majority of people in Asia, whether they favored it or not, served as a trendsetter. The influence that Kishin's Lego was exerting in the USA piqued the curiosity of many in Japan and other parts of Asia where Kishin merchandise had a presence, leading to a rapid surge in the popularity of Kishin's Lego. This turn of events was entirely unexpected in the business world. Chapter 137, Knockoff. USA. While Lego was gaining immense popularity, Tora US released Maria's World. However, much to the disappointment of Tora US game developers, the sales didn't perform well. The Tora US president and executives felt quite disheartened, but their hands were tied. Meanwhile, Lego's global success was becoming increasingly apparent with each passing day. Many major corporations with toy subsidiaries sought to emulate such a product while avoiding copyright issues. Suzuki Financial. Shiko and Seiki were seated together in the office when Seiki remarked, "I'm not sure what's come over our fourth brother lately," pausing solemnly before adding enviously, "He's been exceptionally fortunate." Ctto nodded and stated, "We have connections, and we could undermine his good fortune whenever we choose." Seiki was taken aback, his brow furrowing as he responded, "You intend to disrupt his business?" Ctto simply smiled. In fact, he was contemplating enlisting the help of underground criminal organizations to set fire to Kishin's factories in Japan. Seiki expressed concern, saying, "But if this were to be discovered, it would be a grave matter." Ctto continued to smile, asserting, "Come on. Do you realize who we are?" He paused before adding, "We're part of the Suzuki Group. Do you think we'll be exposed?" And chuckled as he said so. Seiki then hesitantly inquired, "What if father were to find out about this?" Ctto wore a reassuring smile as he locked eyes with Seiki, saying, "You won't tell him, will you?" Seiki shivered slightly as he met Ctto's gaze and nodded vigorously. Ctto chuckled lightly and patted Seiki on the shoulder. Meanwhile, in the United States of America, Shuiki couldn't overlook the fact that his cousin's company and their products were achieving global success. He observed his colleagues using Kishin's products, including Kes and Kishin's video games, with Lego being the most successful of them all. Shuiki couldn't suppress his intense feelings of jealousy. He recalled the day when Shinro had garnered favor from the guests at their grandfather's birthday celebration. Meanwhile, at Kishin's Asian headquarters located in Taiwan, Li Han has held the position of president here for quite a while. While he was working in his role as president, his Taiwanese secretary suddenly entered his office, holding something, and exclaimed, "Mr. Han, take a look at this." Li Han furrowed his brow and examined what his secretary was holding. It was a white console, somewhat reminiscent of the Famicom. Li Han frowned and inquired in rough Hokkien Chinese, "What is this?" Duan Fan, a male Taiwanese who served as Li Han's secretary, responded seriously, "Mr. Han, this object I have in my hand is a Famicom knockoff from China." Li Han stroked his chin and mused, "Really?" He wasn't too surprised. After all, even in Japan, prominent Japanese companies like Suzuki and Tora tried to emulate the Famicom while avoiding copyright infringement, as their video game consoles were only similar but not exact copies. Li Han took the Chinese Famicom knockoff and studied it thoughtfully. He noticed the name in red letters, with a font and design remarkably similar to Kishin's logo. The letters were also in English, and it was named Subber. Li Han furrowed his brow and inquired, "Subber?" Duan Fan nodded and explained, "Yes, Mr. Han. This knockoff originated in China, and it was initially launched there." Li Han was deeply concerned. Kishin had struggled to enter the Chinese market, and now someone was blatantly imitating their products. Duan Fan noticed Li Han's concern and added, "Although Kishin's Famicom and video games hadn't officially entered China, some Chinese people in Southeast Asia had encountered Kishin's products. When they returned to China, news of a Japanese company making waves globally began to circulate. While not all Chinese had experienced Famicom, those who had would share their experiences, and some even brought Famicom consoles back with them. Consequently, many people in China, especially on the mainland, had some knowledge about it." Li Han nodded and inquired, "So, a Chinese company attempted to produce a Famicom knockoff?" Duan Fan affirmed with a nod, saying, "Yes, and it gained significant popularity in China due to its affordability." Li Han nodded and probed further, "Which company is behind this?" Duan Fan nodded as well, sharing, "It's the Xiaobaoang Company, located in Zhongshan, China." While Li Han absorbed this information, his secretary, Duan Fan, added another piece of concerning news. Furthermore, this Subber video game system also imitated Suzuki. This console includes a keyboard for educational purposes. Li Han nodded and then asked with seriousness, "Can this system run Kishin video games?" Duan Fan hesitated briefly upon hearing the question and then sighed, "Yes." Li Han's expression turned grave, realizing the potential impact of this imitation. Duan Fan reassured, "But please, don't worry. This knockoff can only run a limited number of Kishin's video games, and it struggles to run most of our Kishin video games properly. Li Han breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing this. He then dismissed his secretary and decided to inform Shin about the situation. Toshima Ward, Tokyo, Japan. Kishin headquarters. Shin had just been contacted by Li Han, who informed him that a Chinese company had copied their Kishin video game console. However, he wasn't particularly surprised. In fact, he had been anticipating this for quite some time. His company's products were simply too successful for other companies to ignore. In fact, Shin had also anticipated a Lego knockoff, given its recent and resounding success in the market. However, this was an inevitability. After all, even in his previous life, the Lego company had drawn inspiration from other brick companies, and when Lego bricks gained immense popularity, various companies had attempted to enter the brick business with similar products. These companies managed to avoid infringement and still sell bricks reminiscent of Lego. Furthermore, the Super video game system hailed from China. Even if Shin were to file a case due to the pirated Kishin video games, it would be in vain because China lacked specific laws and regulations concerning video game piracy, unlike most parts of the world with established anti-piracy legislation. Additionally, Kishin had no established presence in China, making it impossible to enforce their intellectual property rights there. These were all factors contributing to why Shin chose not to take action against these imitating companies. After all, the 16-bit Kishin was soon set to enter the market. Chapter 138, Competitors Counterattack. Tokyo, Japan. Inside a building adjacent to a certain airport, a tense atmosphere prevailed. Ctto had just made a bold request to underworld gangs to interfere with Kishin's operations, but to his surprise, Shitai, the representative of the Yakuza gang from the Yamauchi clan, didn't agree. "I apologize, Mr. Suzuki, but we cannot comply with your request," Shitai stated with a solemn expression. Puzzled, Ctto furrowed his brow and inquired, "Why?" Shitai surveyed the room before responding, "Our hands are tied, as Kishin is the one company we dare not cross." He paused, adding gravely, "I can't disclose the exact reasons, but my only advice to you, Ctto Suzuki, is to steer clear of Kishin." Ctto's dissatisfaction was evident, and with a nod from Shitai, he departed on his own. Frustration gnawed at Ctto, and he couldn't help but grit his teeth. He called Seiki, who answered, and Ctto lamented, they didn't agree. Ctto and Seiki engaged in a conversation, both perplexed as to why the most formidable gang hesitated to disrupt Kishin's operations. Kishin's headquarters. Meanwhile, Shin found himself in a confrontation with a high-ranking official from the bureau of the MOF. Murayama Yoshihiro, the Director General, was in a meeting with Kishin's founder and CEO to discuss the recent borrowing of Kishin merchandise by U.S. banks. They were currently deliberating whether Kishin could truly meet the obligations of the debt they had acquired from various major banks in the USA. "Of course, we can fulfill our debt," Shin reassured with a smile. "The popularity of our Lego products speaks for itself, wouldn't you agree?" Murayama Yoshihiro nodded in acknowledgement but raised a valid point, saying, "Indeed, but I question the necessity of borrowing from multiple banks simultaneously." Shin chuckled and explained, "Have you heard of syndicated loans? We require a substantial amount of capital, so we've borrowed from various banks to pool their resources, allowing them to share the associated risk. What's more, negotiating with multiple banks may yield more favorable interest rates compared to borrowing from a single bank." Murayama Yoshihiro nodded in comprehension and continued, "I grasp the process, but considering that I'm uncertain about your current financial health, it remains dubious whether you can meet such a debt." He paused, speaking with seriousness, "Moreover, we can't be certain that your company's Lego products will maintain their popularity over time." Shin remained silent as he absorbed the comments. Truth be told, he wasn't sure if Lego would replicate the popularity it had in his previous life. Nevertheless, it didn't concern him greatly. The loan served the betterment of his business, and as long as the funds were managed wisely, he saw no issue in borrowing. Breaking the silence, Shin inquired, "I assume you, representing the Ministry of Finance, have a broader agenda beyond our ability to repay the debt, correct?" Murayama Yoshihiro nodded in agreement and explained, "Indeed, we would prefer, if possible, for you to consider borrowing from our country's banks rather than foreign ones." A smile formed on Shin's face as he responded, "I had a feeling this was the primary motive behind your visit." Murayama Yoshihiro nodded once more and added, "The Ministry of Finance will actively encourage our domestic banks to offer considerably lower interest rates in comparison to what the US banks are proposing." Shin found himself a bit surprised and mused, "Really?" In all honesty, he had completely overlooked the possibility of borrowing from Japanese banks for financing, resulting in his choice to engage with US banks. After some discussion, Shin and Director General Murayama Yoshihiro reached an agreement. Shin consented to the proposal, understanding the significance of the Japanese government's involvement. As November approached, Famicom and Kishin's video games became incredibly popular among the people of Tokyo, Japan. On November 1, 1991, Suzuki introduced their Halloween-themed video game titled Thriller. This game bore a striking resemblance to Michael Jackson's Thriller. The game's storyline followed a girl pursued by zombies who eventually obtained weapons to defend herself. According to the game's manual, the ultimate adversary was Michael Johnson, an exceptionally potent conscious zombie. There were also many bosses to confront along the way. Within a few days of its release, Thriller gained significant attention and became a clear trend. One of the primary reasons Suzuki's video game gained immense popularity was its striking resemblance to Thriller, the iconic song by Michael Jackson. It enjoyed a rapid surge in sales, allowing Suzuki to compete with Kishin, at least in terms of the Thriller video game's success. The fact that even Michael Jackson himself endorsed this video game called Thriller made it abundantly clear that the game drew heavy inspiration from the song Thriller. In the United States, Thriller was released just a day after its Japanese launch, quickly capturing the attention of many. Tora Maria's World also began to gain recognition due to its unique gameplay and animations. Although Maria's World was initially overshadowed by the surging popularity of LEGO, it gradually earned the recognition it deserved as word spread through the video game player community. As Tora and Suzuki started to fully harness the capabilities of their 16-bit video game console system, Kishin's competitors began to establish their presence in the market. Gradually, a significant shift occurred as many players who previously held a negative view of Tora and Suzuki due to their lackluster video game library began to appreciate their newly released titles. In fact, Tora and Suzuki experienced a steady uptick in sales, while Kishin's sales began to noticeably decelerate. These were the initial indicators of the 16-bit system's superiority over the 8-bit, even though Kishin's competitors had not yet fully harnessed its full potential. Undoubtedly, this development had a substantial impact on Kishin's sales in both the United States and Japan. It was undeniable that Kishin was consistently producing top-tier video games with excellent gameplay. However, Tora and Suzuki were not to be outdone, they were holding their ground firmly. Many individuals in Japan and the United States believed that if Kishin didn't adopt the same 16-bit system as Tora and Suzuki, they would eventually lose the advantages they once held. As skepticism loomed in Japan regarding Kishin's ability to maintain its market presence, both domestically and in Asia, Kishin responded to Tora and Suzuki's releases by launching their own video games. This move left many people in Japan disappointed, as they assumed Kishin was succumbing to pressure and lacked the capability to develop their own 16-bit system. Instead, they seemed to be countering Tora and Suzuki's challenge in the realm of superior system performance with their high-quality video games. The question of whether Kishin could sustain the quality of their video games despite the constant stream of releases remained uncertain. Chapter 139, 3 Video Games. Tokyo, Japan. On November 25, 1991, the same day the president of the Soviet Union resigned, Kishin unveiled 3 highly anticipated video games. The first game was Castlevania, the second was Mega Man, and the third was Dragon Quest. This consistent release of video games sparked excitement within the Japanese gaming community. Meanwhile, Tora and Suzuki breathed a sigh of relief because Kishin had not released the video game they were eagerly awaiting, Pokémon. The Pokémon anime had gained immense popularity in Japan and Asia, but Tora and Suzuki were unsure whether it would have a similar impact in the United States of America. For now, they were just relieved that Kishin hadn't launched a Pokémon video game. The fact that the Pokémon anime hadn't gained much influence outside of Asia was another matter. However, Tora and Suzuki were already anticipating Kishin's potential release of the Pokémon anime in the US or Europe. That's why they were preparing to launch their own anime franchise, determined not to be outdone. Osaka, Japan. Okura Iwao had just acquired 3 new Kishin video games simultaneously. Okura Iwao could easily be described as a devoted fan of Kishin video games. To him, every Kishin video game was either exceptional or a certified masterpiece. He paid no mind to what others might say. For Okura Iwao, Kid Icarus, one of the most challenging video games alongside Metroid and The Legend of Zelda, was his personal favorite. Due to his masochistic gaming preferences, few of his classmates chose to interact with him. Upon returning home, he promptly connected his Famicom to the television and inserted Castlevania into the cartridge slot. The game booted up, and the title appeared on the screen. Nonchalantly, Okura Iwao began playing. A muscular 2D pixel character strolled in front of an apparently abandoned castle, coming to a halt at the Crimson Gate. As per the game's manual, the character was Simon Belmont, a 22-year-old vampire hunter and the descendant of Christopher Belmont, the legendary hero who had vanquished Count Dracula in 1591. As Okura Iwao controlled the character, he attacked with a whip. When he struck a torching vase, it released a heart, indicating Simon Belmont's health, which he promptly collected. Hitting other vases yielded various items, transforming the character's appearance and abilities. Okura Iwao continued, with his character walking rather than running. As mobs appeared, he dispatched them with his whip, causing items to drop. He collected these items and encountered a leaping panther. Further into the game, Okura Iwao attacked bats and struck a wall that broke, releasing more items. However, he couldn't figure out how to proceed beyond a certain point. Bats constantly attacked him, leaving him bewildered, wondering, where should I go? Returning to a previous area proved impossible, but Okura Iwao noticed a candelabra he hadn't interacted with before. Hitting it, he obtained an item, but he still couldn't find a way past the wall. After some time, he finally spotted an unassuming stairs leading downstairs, on the left side that he had entirely overlooked. With a wry chuckle and a shake of his head, Okura Iwao proceeded to guide his character downstairs by pressing the down button on the controller. As Okura Iwao continued to play, he initially believed that Castlevania would be a breeze, but slowly he came to realize that it was quite challenging. After this revelation, Okura Iwao removed the Castlevania cartridge from the Famicom. He planned to return to it later, still eager to try the other Kishin video games he had purchased. Next, he inserted Dragon Quest, and as he played, he noticed that the gameplay bore a resemblance to titles like The Legend of Zelda or Final Fantasy. After spending some time with Dragon Quest, he decided to give Mega Man a try. Upon inserting Mega Man, he found that, like Super Mario Bros. And Castlevania, it was a side-scrolling video game. Mega Man featured a futuristic setting, akin to Metroid, with the main character being a robot named Mega Man. Okura Iwao pressed the start button as the game's title screen appeared. He was presented with a choice of stages: Cutman, Gutsman, Electman, Iceman, Fireman, and Bombman. Being unsure, he selected the Cutman stage, which happened to be the default choice, and pressed the start button to begin the stage. Cutman jumped, and a message displayed: Cutman clear points, 80,000. With that, the video game Mega Man was now underway. As the game commenced, Okura Iwao took the reins of his in-game character, Mega Man. He skillfully controlled Mega Man, using his shooting ability to attack. Floating enemies suddenly appeared. Initially, Okura Iwao assumed it would be an easy encounter, but he struggled to accurately target and shoot the flying foes. His attacks became somewhat reckless, and as the enemies evaded his shots, Okura Iwao believed they might just fly away. To his surprise, the floating foes, referred to as Bunbai Heli in the game's story manual, returned and mounted a relentless, simultaneous attack on Okura Iwao. Okura Iwao attempted to fight back, but he struggled to accurately target and shoot the flying enemies. Frustrated, he chose to ignore them and tried to proceed through the stage. However, more Bunbai Heli suddenly appeared and launched an assault on Okura Iwao's in-game character, Mega Man. His character's health dwindled rapidly until it resulted in a game over. Upon restarting the game, Okura Iwao made the decision to systematically eliminate the Bunbai Heli despite the considerable health cost. He realized he had no other option, as he would be persistently attacked until a game over was inevitable. Continuing in the video game, Okura Iwao realized that the challenge he faced this time was a peculiar red contraption, a wall-mounted gun with a beak-like armored shell that opened and closed. With no pesky Bunbai Heli in sight, Okura Iwao breathed a sigh of relief as he took on the blaster. However, his relief was short-lived. As he advanced further, Okura Iwao noticed that several blaster units were continuously firing in all directions. A slight movement of his in-game character resulted in a hit. Undeterred, Okura Iwao climbed a ladder, successfully eliminating some blaster units as he progressed. But as he ascended, he encountered a multitude of blaster units that relentlessly shot projectiles. His in-game character, Mega Man, was struck and sent back to the previous level. Thinking he could climb back since he had completely eliminated the blaster units in the previous area, he was surprised to find that the area had seemingly reset, with several blaster units still in place and shooting incessantly. Consequently, when Okura Iwao's in-game character was hit again, it resulted in another game over. Despite the challenges, Okura Iwao couldn't help but chuckle wryly. Yet another demanding Kishin video game. He paused and flashed an eccentric smile, adding, "But I enjoy the challenge." Chapter 140, Reviews. In Japan, the three Kishin video games quickly became a major topic of discussion. Shonen Jump promptly published their review of the newly released Kishin video games. Due to the Video Game Addict's review of Shonen Jump's success, other manga publishers followed suit, creating their own video game reviews conducted by professional players. Even magazine companies jumped on the bandwagon. Given that the Video Game Addicts were the most popular and successful video game reviewers at this time, some magazine companies sought to include their reviews in their publications. As a result, reviews by Video Game Addicts for various video games were published, attracting a significant readership. The first game to be reviewed was Castlevania. The introduction lauded its innovative gameplay, captivating graphics, and catchy soundtrack, along with its spooky theme. The review also touched on the controls. However, it criticized the game for its limited gameplay, particularly the inability to jump on stairs and the restricted range of the whip, which could pose challenges. The final boss was singled out as a particularly frustrating and difficult encounter. As for Mega Man, the introduction commended it as a perfect example of a challenging yet immensely enjoyable game. Players were tasked with running, jumping, and defeating enemies across 6 different levels, each culminating in a battle against a robot master. Upon defeating a robot master, their special weapon was added to the player's inventory, introducing a strategic element to the game. The review also emphasized the basic controls and the use of capsules, both large and small, to restore health and weapon charge. Extra lives were scattered in hard-to-reach places. Although Mega Man received high praise, it was rated just slightly below Castlevania. Regarding Dragon Quest, the Video Game Addicts assessed it as an RPG. It featured captivating music, extensive dungeons to explore, towns to visit, a variety of weapons and armor to purchase, and numerous battles with the occasional level up to boot. For players who relished this style of gameplay, Dragon Quest found favor, although the reviewers did highlight its shortcomings. The rating for Dragon Quest fell just slightly below that of Mega Man. These reviews ignited discussions and piqued the interest of the video game community. Many individuals found themselves captivated by at least one of the 3 Kishin video games. On the flip side, there was a substantial number of people who did not warm up to the video games released by Kishin. While the release of Kishin's video games saw an increase in sales and garnered favor among many, there was also a notable group of individuals who did not find Kishin's new offerings to their liking. Recognizing the superiority of 16-bit technology over 8-bit, Tora and Suzuki had already begun the gradual process of enhancing their video game graphics, even though they might not yet match the gameplay standards set by Kishin. USA. Meanwhile, in the United States of America, video game players who purchased Kishin's new video games expressed a strong liking for the game Castlevania. For them, Castlevania provided more enjoyment than Suzuki's Thriller. Additionally, Mega Man, known for its incredible difficulty, ignited a significant challenge within the gaming communities. Conversely, Dragon Quest appeared to be the less favored choice. This could be attributed to the fact that, unlike in Japan, RPG games like Dragon Quest were currently less popular in the United States at this moment. At present, the most popular video games in the United States of America were Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, and Street Fighter. Although The Legend of Zelda shared some similarities with RPGs, it wasn't a pure RPG, and it was considered highly enjoyable compared to Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest according to the opinions of US players. Super Mario Bros. Stood out as possibly the most renowned video game globally. Whether in East Asia, Southeast Asia, Japan, the USA, or even some European countries, Super Mario Bros. Enjoyed universal recognition. Tora and Suzuki attempted to compete with the popularity of Super Mario Bros. By creating games that emulated its style, but their efforts were in vain. The allure of Super Mario Bros. Was indescribable at this moment. Meanwhile, Street Fighter introduced a new style of gameplay that was immensely favored by both new and experienced players alike. Kishin Headquarters. In the Kishin headquarters, Shin and Myra are currently situated in a conference room, where they are engaged in discussions regarding the sales and marketing strategy of their company. The sales of the 3 video games had declined compared to previous figures, which raised concerns among the executives. Due to confidentiality reasons, they were unaware of the current status of the research on the 16-bit video game console. However, they proposed the idea of potentially leaking information about their ongoing work on a superior system to reassure their fans. Shin, on the other hand, paid little heed to the executives' worries. In his view, these executives were not entirely trustworthy, and they were oblivious to the fact that the company was presently researching a handheld gaming device. After the meeting concluded and Shin found himself back in his office, his phone emitted a soft beep, prompting him to answer. "Hello, Mr. Masayoshi," Shin greeted with a smile. "Have you taken care of everything?" Oreo Masayoshi's voice responded, "Boss, we've already hired actors and actresses, prepared the extras, and the entire filming team is ready. Taping is about to commence." Satisfied, Shin replied, "That's excellent. I'll likely visit again to oversee the taping." After a brief conversation with Oreo Masayoshi, Shin ended the call. Shin was planning to travel to the USA once more, not only to supervise the taping but also to assess the motion capture and CGI companies that had piqued his interest. His intention was to negotiate with these companies to secure their technology for future development in his 3D video games. With a smile, Shin began a discussion with Myra, who had entered his office for a moment. This time, he wanted to invite Myra to accompany him to the US, but she shook her head, explaining that she still needed to attend university. Chapter 141, Preparation. New York, USA. December 2, 1991. In the Kishin Pictures workspace, Shin, Oryo Masayoshi, along with several writers from the Writers Guild of America, WGA, and Steven Spielberg from the Directors Guild of America, DGA, were present for a meeting. During the meeting, Shin occasionally cast glances at Steven Spielberg. This was because Spielberg was a legendary director in his past life, having helmed numerous successful films. Even though this version of Spielberg was merely a parallel existence from Shin's previous life, there seemed to be little distinction between the two, except for their age and names, perhaps. They discussed the Jurassic Park project, and when one of the writers inquired, where would be a suitable filming location, Steven Spielberg stroked his chin as they all pondered the ideal spot. Shin smiled and suggested, the Hawaiian Islands. All eyes turned toward Shin. Both Steven Spielberg and the other writers regarded him with curiosity. To be honest, Steven Spielberg, like everyone else on the film team, was unaware of who Shin was. Shin had simply joined the meeting with Oryo Masayoshi and hadn't spoken much, leading them to assume he might be Oryo Masayoshi's son. Seeing the bewilderment on everyone's faces, Shin spoke up, saying, "I'm Shinro Suzuki, the writer of Jurassic Park." Surprise rippled through the room as they learned that the author of Jurassic Park was this young man. This time, Steven Spielberg nodded in acknowledgement of Shin's presence in the meeting. Benjamin Carey, the 30-year-old scriptwriter, chimed in, "I've been to Hawaii before, and considering that the story is set on an island, it might be the perfect location for the project." Upon hearing this, most of them nodded, and some of the writers were eager to engage with Shin since he was the writer of Jurassic Park, hoping to enhance their understanding of the story. Meanwhile, Oryo Masayoshi remained silent. He couldn't quite comprehend why Shin chose to conceal the fact that he was the owner of Kishin Pictures from the directors and writers, but he wasn't overly concerned about it. After a while, Steven Spielberg also approached Shin with a smile. "Young man," he said as he patted Shin's shoulder, "I have a strong feeling that your story will become quite popular due to its unique plot." Shin responded with a faint smile, saying, "I'm not so sure. Hollywood can be critical, and I don't have high expectations or much confidence in it, even though I genuinely believe it's good." Steven Spielberg furrowed his brow and said, "Don't pay attention to them." He paused before continuing, "If you believe in the quality of your story, that's sufficient." With a reassuring smile, he added, "Just trust your instincts." Other writers joined in to encourage Shin, while Oryo Masayoshi couldn't help but feel somewhat powerless as he watched his young boss engage with people. Following the discussion, Steven Spielberg expressed with a frown, "This film will likely cost at least $50 to $60 million. One of them nodded in agreement, saying, "That's true. With CGI and motion capture, the costs can add up significantly." Then another turned to Oryo Masayoshi and inquired, "Mr. Masayoshi, even though you've assured us that you'll fund this film project no matter how expensive it gets, with the estimated cost alone reaching at least $50 or $60 million, do you still plan to stand by your word?" After that, Steven Spielberg and the others turned their attention to Oryo Masayoshi. The executives were left speechless, as the film team was unaware that the person funding the project was the young man before them. However, following Shin's cue, they chose to remain silent. Oryo and the executives had a faint understanding of Shin's motives. It was likely to blend in with the team seamlessly, avoiding any complications that might arise if the film team perceived Shin as just another affluent second-generation individual meddling in their business. They probably wouldn't believe that Shin was the actual author of Jurassic Park. Oryo Masayoshi responded to the film team's doubts with a wry smile, saying, "Don't worry, my boss mentioned that even if the project budget estimation goes up to $100 million, it's not a problem." The other executives chimed in, reassuring the film team. This left the filming team pleasantly surprised. Steven Spielberg exclaimed while patting Shin's shoulder with a smile, young man, it seems you're very lucky. He paused before adding, having someone willing to invest a significant amount to bring your story to life. One of the writers chimed in, saying, seems like the person backing Kishin Pictures is incredibly wealthy and unconcerned about the risks. Another added with a chuckle, hee hee, what's there to worry about when the veteran Steven Spielberg is set to direct it? A third one agreed, saying, that's a valid point. Steven Spielberg furrowed his brow upon hearing their conversations. Hey, you're all giving me too much credit, he said. He paused and gave Shin's shoulder a hearty pat, causing Shin to smile wryly. I am confident that if this young man's story is executed well, it will indeed become a blockbuster. Benjamin Carey chuckled and remarked, a blockbuster, hey. While he had some confidence that the film would be profitable, he remained skeptical about whether it would truly achieve blockbuster status. It wasn't just him, in fact, aside from Shin and Steven Spielberg, no one had high expectations, and the word blockbuster didn't even enter their thoughts regarding the film project Jurassic Park. Oryo Masayoshi and the executives shared this sentiment. To them, Jurassic Park was something Shin had conceived casually. Despite viewing Shin as a young and accomplished entrepreneur, they also saw him as someone who was exuberantly enthusiastic, believing that everything he touched would turn into a success. In fact, Oryo Masayoshi and the others had already mentally prepared for the failure of Jurassic Park, and it wouldn't come as a shock to them. The actors and actresses cast in the Jurassic Park film project were mostly second or third-tier talents in Hollywood, lacking significant influence and popularity. Moreover, the overall storyline of Jurassic Park was considered rather bizarre when viewed from today's perspective. But, after all, it wasn't their money on the line, so they didn't pay it much heed. As for the reasons they contemplated, these were probably why Hollywood critics were already poised for Jurassic Park to fail, and the likelihood of Kishin Pictures turning a profit from it seemed uncertain. In summary, everyone, with the exception of Shin and Steven Spielberg, lacked enthusiasm for the Jurassic Park film project. For Shin, he remained confident that it would indeed succeed if executed well, as Steven Spielberg had mentioned. Chapter 142, Acquisition Spree. Santa Monica, California, USA. ASC Motion Capture Headquarters. Craig Wills served as the CEO of ASC Motion Capture. At present, the company faced financial challenges because motion capture technology was still in its infancy. Spencer Thompson, the coup, engaged in discussions with CEO Craig Wills about securing investors or selling the company. They were left with no choice due to the ongoing financial issues. If these financial problems persisted, they would have to declare bankruptcy, a scenario they desperately hoped to avoid. Frustrated, Craig Wills ran his hand over his forehead and expressed, I've invested my hard-earned money to keep this venture afloat, and we've been able to generate revenue through collaborations with other studios. Yet, these studios just don't have much faith in motion capture technology. Spencer Thompson chuckled wryly, what can you expect? Motion capture is just too complex and costly. They probably prefer props over CGI and motion capture. Sighing, Craig Wills lamented, these studios have a limited understanding of film production. However, as he sighed, Spencer Thompson thoughtfully remarked, Craig, have you heard of Kishin Pictures? Craig Wills furrowed his brow upon hearing that and responded thoughtfully, Kishin Pictures? Isn't that a company that's consistently criticized in Hollywood? Spencer Thompson nodded with a smile and said, yes, but they're showing interest in acquiring a company. Craig Wills was taken aback, exclaiming, really? Spencer Thompson nodded affirmatively and replied, exactly. Craig Wills chuckled wryly and inquired, how much are they willing to offer? With a chuckle, Spencer Thompson responded, they're putting forward $15 million. Craig Wills stroked his chin thoughtfully and mused, $15 million, hey. Spencer Thompson nodded and added, the founder of Kishin Pictures mentioned that if you agree, he'll also offer you some shares. Upon hearing this, Craig Wills couldn't help but feel enticed. It was undoubtedly a far better option than facing bankruptcy. Considering their current financial predicament, $15 million was a substantial sum. Craig Wills was more than willing to agree, especially since he would receive some shares. Being the CEO or not was no longer his primary concern. Vicon Motion System was the motion capture company gaining a significant advantage, actively involved in numerous projects. However, companies like ASC Motion Capture were in dire straits, unable to secure projects for months, aside from occasional small ones that couldn't sustain the company. This was likely why founder and CEO Craig Wills was inclined to sell it for $15 million, with the added prospect of obtaining shares. Playa Vista, Los Angeles, California, USA. Digital CGI Headquarters. Digital CGI, a CGI company, currently faced a situation similar to ASC Motion Capture, with Digital Domain being one of the few CGI companies struggling due to low project demand. Since it was still 1991, and as previously mentioned, motion capture and CGI technologies were not as widely used as they would be in the future. These two groundbreaking technologies were still in their infancy within the industry, with many people remaining unaware of their existence. Just like ASC Motion Capture, Shin also expressed interest in acquiring the company and possibly purchasing it for $23 million. The CEO, William Ford, was a 30-year-old entrepreneur who founded the company in 1987. Initially, everything seemed to be going well. However, as time passed, the complexity and cost of these technologies deterred many studios from committing to films that heavily relied on motion capture or CGI. Even when they did use these technologies, they were incorporated for only a brief duration, while the rest of the film was shot using traditional props. These strategies were not limited to Hollywood, they were implemented worldwide. While there might be a high-profile Hollywood studio occasionally demanding extended use of motion capture and CGI, such occurrences were rare. Following such projects, there were often no substantial projects left for these technologies to be applied to. Consequently, digital CGI found itself in dire financial straits. When William Ford received an offer from Kishin Pictures to acquire his company for $23 million, he promptly accepted. After all, he had initially invested $5 million to start the company, and now that someone was willing to buy it for such a substantial sum, he readily agreed. William Ford had grown weary of perpetually seeking clients. Just a day after agreeing to the deal, he was met by a Japanese young man and a Japanese middle-aged man when they arrived at his office. Upon their entrance, William Ford promptly greeted them. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Suzuki," he addressed the middle-aged man first, presuming him to be the Mr. Suzuki he had spoken with over the phone the previous day. The middle-aged man chuckled wryly and replied, "My name is Oryo Masayoshi." He paused, introducing the young man in a sleek black suit. "This is Shinro Suzuki, the individual willing to acquire your company for $23 million. William Ford was taken aback by Shinro Suzuki's youthful appearance. He immediately offered an apology, saying, "I apologize if my mistake was offensive." Shin smiled as he shook hands with William Ford. "It's quite all right," he reassured, adding, "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Ford." William Ford nodded, extended his greetings to Oryo Masayoshi, and then they delved into the discussions regarding the acquisition contract. To Shin's surprise, William Ford was wholeheartedly in favor of selling the company to Kishin Pictures. After finalizing the agreement, Shin addressed William Ford, saying, "Mr. Ford, I understand your experience in the CGI industry, so if you're willing, I would like you to continue as the CEO of the company." William Ford was taken aback and exclaimed, "You want me to continue as the CEO?" He had expected that after selling his company, he would embark on a life as an ordinary individual with millions in his bank account. In truth, his ambition was still rooted in working as the CEO of his CGI company. However, he was acutely aware that if his company went bankrupt, it wouldn't just be him affected, but also the employees under his charge. While he might have appeared to agree immediately, it was a decision that came with a degree of emotional difficulty for him. The decision for the acquiring party to either dismiss the CEO or opt to keep the original CEO in place was a common practice in the business world. However, William Ford was genuinely delighted that he could remain in his current position. Observing William Ford's contemplation, Shin added, "It's up to you, of course." William Ford eagerly nodded and declared, "Absolutely, I want to." With that, Shin smiled as he successfully acquired the CGI company. In the following days, Shin also managed to acquire the ASC Motion Capture Company. Similar to the digital CGI company, he allowed the founder and CEO of ASC Motion Capture to retain their positions. Chapter 143, Current Arcades. Tokyo, Japan. While video game consoles gained immense popularity in Japan, as well as in Asia and the USA, one cannot overlook the enduring appeal of arcades. Gamers of all ages continue to frequent the arcade sections in various stores and malls. Arcades enjoyed a special place in the gaming landscape, especially as Kishin continued to innovate in the arcade sector, developing machines designed for specific video games. Even Suzuki and Tora had their own arcade machines, each capable of playing at least one of their video games. One notable example was Street Fighter. The arcade version of Street Fighter allowed for thrilling 1v1 battles, igniting the interest of numerous video game enthusiasts. Indeed, many gamers were already engaged in fierce competition and had developed their own strategies while indulging in the game. In a particular arcade section, Nishida Haru was engrossed in a match on Kishin's arcade machine, which hosted the video game Street Fighter. He was pitted against a fellow gamer, a stranger equally addicted to Street Fighter. As Nishida Haru continued his game, he managed to defeat his opponent. Exhilarated, he exclaimed, "Yes! I won!" and lightly tapped the control board of the arcade machine. On the other hand, his opponent, a young man named Aoki Shige, let out a disappointed sigh, saying, "You're pretty lucky, Haru-san." Nishida Haru chuckled at the remark and replied, "Shige-chan, I've won at least 30 times against you, while you've only managed to secure victory 13 times. Aoki Shige retorted and engaged in a conversation with Nishida Haru for a while. The other video game players in the arcade section went about their own business. Some, like Nishida Haru and Aoki Shige, engaged in matches against each other, whether playing Street Fighter or Super Mario Bros. 3. However, as they did so, several arcade personnel entered the arcade section, carrying a few new arcade machines with them. Several video game players noticed and discussions ensued. "Is that a new arcade machine? Hey, did you see it? It's from Kishin!" exclaimed one of the video game players. Several video game players also noticed the Kishin logo on the newly arrived arcade machines, and excitement rippled through the crowd of gamers, whether they were Kishin, Tora, or Suzuki enthusiasts. It was widely acknowledged by both Tora and Suzuki fans that Kishin produced the most captivating and innovative video games compared to the two larger companies. However, what often irked Tora and Suzuki fans about Kishin was its outdated 8-bit system. While Tora and Suzuki had transitioned to 16-bit systems a while ago, despite starting later than Kishin. As the group of working personnel carefully placed the Kishin arcade machines in the designated area, a few curious gamers approached them. One of the players inquired, "Hey, what video games can be played on these arcade machines?" The working personnel furrowed his brows and simply pointed at the design of one of the arcade machines, explaining, "Well, judging by the art style and design of that arcade machine, it's pretty obvious that it plays Kirby's Adventure." Nishida Haru nodded and inquired further as he pointed at an arcade machine featuring a design from Super Mario Bros. 3, "So, does that arcade machine run Super Mario Bros. 3 then?" He was somewhat perplexed, as there was already an arcade machine that ran Super Mario Bros. 3, but this one brought by the working personnel seemed slightly different. With a smile, one of the working personnel responded, "Ah, that one. He paused briefly before adding, that's an arcade machine for playing the Yoshi video game. The video game players, upon hearing the name of the game, were taken aback as they hadn't come across it before. One of the players asked, Yoshi? Is that a Kishin video game? The question was quite evident given that the Kishin logo was prominently displayed on the arcade machines. The working personnel shared a chuckle, and one of them replied, indeed, it's a Kishin game. He nodded and continued, it's a new addition to Kishin's lineup, exclusively playable in arcades. This revelation left the gamers in the arcade section surprised, sparking conversations like, really? A video game exclusively for arcades? Mused one of the players, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. One of the video game players, a woman sporting a Kishin jacket, hastily occupied one of the new arcade machines from Kishin and inserted a coin. Several players eagerly joined her, trying out the new arcade machines running the Yoshi game. The workers observed the scene with smiles and exchanged glances, continuing their tasks of placing the arcade machines in the designated area. As the video game players delved into the Yoshi game, they initially anticipated an intriguing experience. However, they soon realized that it was essentially a game where Mario caught eggshells and skillfully rearranged them to capture falling items or enemies from Super Mario Bros. The game had an intriguing concept and gameplay, but it left them somewhat disappointed. While they were in this state of mixed feelings, several workers re-entered the arcade section, carrying a few more arcade machines. The video game players cast a curious glance, and this time, they noticed another arcade machine bearing the Kishin logo. However, the design on this one was distinct, featuring drawings of various blocks like T, L, or I on its cover. Upon spotting the distinct art style and design on the arcade machine's cover, their interest was piqued. Nishida Haru, accompanied by Aoki Shige, both avid video game players, inquired excitedly, another Kishin arcade machine, and it has a unique design. Any idea what video game it hosts? The workers were part of Kishin, and their primary responsibility was the operation of arcades. One of the Kishin personnel explained, judging by the art style and design of these arcade machines, they can run a new Kishin video game, much like Yoshi, but currently, it's exclusive to these arcade machines and not available on the Kishin SKT Famicom. The worker paused, noticing the curiosity of the gamers, and added, the game's name is Tetris. As the name Tetris reached the ears of both gamers and non-gamers in the vicinity, nearly everyone had the same surprised thought, wait, isn't that an old video game? One of the video game players inquired, wait, that game isn't exactly new anymore. As he mentioned that, many other video game players nodded and added, you're absolutely right. It's a game from the 1960s if I recall correctly. Then, another gamer directed a question to the Kishin personnel, is this game what we're thinking it is? The Kishin workers exchanged glances, and one of them replied with a wry chuckle, indeed, your expectations are correct. It's the classic Tetris game that was once highly popular. When both the bystanders and the video game players heard this, they gasped in surprise. Kishin was actually considering remaking a game from the past. I apologize if some readers have expressed concerns about the pace of my writing and the delay in releasing the 16-bit and Game Boy. However, given that I am currently publishing 3 chapters per day, I believed it would be more manageable. In Chapter 151, the main character will finally unveil the 16-bit and Game Boy, along with the video games they have been preparing for a long time during the ongoing research on the 16-bit and Game Boy. I'm sorry if it seemed like I was dragging the story, perhaps it's because I was moving too quickly and publishing 3 chapters daily, which may have affected the pace of my writing. Chapter 144, Tetris. Tokyo, Japan. Koizumi Otaka, a young man, recently learned from his classmates that Kishin had released an exclusive video game only available in arcades. Despite being a casual gamer, he decided to pay a visit to the arcade section of a specific store. Upon entering the arcade section, someone suddenly grasped his shoulder, startling Koizumi Otaka. When he turned to see who it was, he was pleasantly surprised to find his school friend, Ryaji Nori, a blonde young man. "Koizumi-kun, what brings you here?" Ryaji Nori asked with a friendly smile. Koizumi Otaka smiled faintly while scratching the back of his head and said, "I'm here for the Kishin video games exclusive to arcade machines." Ryaji Nori, who had previously informed Koizumi Otaka about this, smiled and said as they walked shoulder to shoulder toward one of the unoccupied arcade machines, "Several arcade machines were just brought here to the mall's arcade section by Kishin workers." He pointed to the arcade machine situated in front of them, which was currently vacant. Seeing Koizumi Otaka's confusion, Ryaji Nori explained, "This unoccupied arcade machine is one of the machines running Kishin video games exclusively available in this arcade." Koizumi Otaka was taken aback by this information. He examined the arcade machine cabinet in front of him, which featured a unique art style and design, with various block drawings such as plus, I, L, and a distinctive control panel at the front. Curiously, Koizumi Otaka asked, "What video game is running on this arcade machine?" With a smile, Ryaji Nori replied, "You'll find out when you play it." He then took a coin from his pocket and inserted it into the arcade machine. Ryaji Nori invited Koizumi Otaka to take a seat in front of the arcade machine. Koizumi hesitated, as it was Ryaji Nori's coin, but he was insisted upon by his friend. Reluctantly, Koizumi took a seat, and the arcade machine's screen came to life, displaying the title of the video game. The title was aesthetically designed, and it read Tetris. Koizumi Otaka couldn't help but be surprised and thought to himself, "Wait. Tetris? Why does it sound so familiar?" Ryaji Nori smiled and nodded, signaling Koizumi Otaka to proceed with starting the video game Tetris. Koizumi Otaka nodded and initiated the video game. As it began, he was taken aback to find Ryaji Nori sitting beside him, and on the screen, two options appeared, 1 player and 2 player. Ryaji Nori, sitting beside him, suggested, "Let's choose 2 players." As he said this, he opened a lid next to the arcade machine, surprising Koizumi Otaka with the discovery of another controller for the arcade machine he was using. Ryaji Nori nodded with a smile as he inserted another coin into the adjacent coin slot. Koizumi Otaka only realized the purpose of that additional coin slot when he saw it, as he had previously assumed it was merely an extra slot without understanding its function. Being more familiar with video game consoles and having limited experience with arcades, he was not well versed in arcade machine mechanics. After selecting 2-player mode, the video game Tetris finally started, presenting a split screen with a VS label in the center. Koizumi Otaka was taken by surprise, and he heard Ryaji Nori say, "Get ready, Koizumi-kun, we'll battle in 3. As Ryaji Nori counted down, the screen displayed a countdown with 3, 2, 1, and Ryaji Nori playfully imitated the American narrator's countdown and exclaimed, "Go!" Koizumi Otaka felt a wave of nervousness as Ryaji Nori displayed such excitement. As the video game Tetris began, Koizumi had anticipated something akin to the competitive fights in the Street Fighter game, but to his surprise, he was met with falling blocks. Koizumi Otaka cautiously manipulated the controller, discovering that when he pressed the left button, the slowly descending blue block also moved to the left. On the other hand, Ryaji Nori was fully engaged, making strategic moves. He pressed the down button, causing the block to plummet rapidly, skillfully stacking blocks to score points. Meanwhile, Koizumi Otaka, still somewhat puzzled and curious about Tetris gameplay, stole a quick glance at Ryaji Nori, who remained deeply focused on the game. With a determined expression, Koizumi turned his attention back to his falling blocks, grinning as he believed he was making the right moves. Koizumi Otaka began to grasp the objective of Tetris, realizing that the aim was to build tall structures with the falling blocks, especially as he noticed Ryaji Nori's blocks steadily decreasing. Koizumi Otaka managed to reach the top border of his screen with his slowly descending blocks. He thought he was about to win but was met with the disappointing text defeat. Meanwhile, on Ryuji Nori's screen, the triumphant message "Victory" appeared. Ryuji Nori found himself perplexed as to why he had won when the countdown hadn't even reached 0. He turned his attention to Koizumi Otaka's screen and noticed that Koizumi Otaka had indeed stacked the blocks all the way up to the border. In disbelief, Ryuji Nori couldn't help but exclaim, "Koizumi-kun! Did you lose on purpose?" He looked at Koizumi Otaka, seeking an explanation. Koizumi Otaka quickly shook his head and explained, "No. I genuinely thought that's how it was supposed to be." Ryuji Nori found himself utterly speechless upon hearing Koizumi Otaka's sincere response, and it was evident that Koizumi was not lying. He sighed helplessly and then asked, "You didn't know how to play Tetris?" Koizumi Otaka shook his head genuinely, admitting his lack of knowledge about the game. Ryuji Nori sighed again and explained that Tetris was a classic video game from the past, which had been remade by Kishin, Tora, and Suzuki. He further clarified that anyone who had frequented arcades before the entrance of these companies into the video game industry would be familiar with the iconic Tetris, a game composed of parentheses and brackets. Ryuji Nori had been an avid Tetris player long before Kishin's arcade machines and video games gained immense popularity. This is why he was overjoyed when Kishin remade Tetris, and he had been enjoying Kishin's video games just as much. Upon hearing Ryuji Nori's explanations, Koizumi Otaka nodded in understanding. Subsequently, Koizumi Otaka inserted 2 coins into the dual coin slots, and both of them, Koizumi Otaka and Ryuji Nori, began to play Tetris together, having a great time. Chapter 145, Tora and Suzuki Anime Preparation. A few days ago, in Tokyo, Japan, the release of Tetris arcades by Kishin sparked a discussion among both video game enthusiasts and those who aren't typically into video games. News outlets also featured the story of Kishin's remake of the classic 1964 video game Tetris, which quickly gained popularity among young people. Arcade sections became vibrant hubs filled with enthusiastic young players. Even the older generation, who had initially criticized Kishin for producing addictive video games deemed harmful to the youth's health, found themselves rushing to stores and malls to try the revamped Tetris. As a result, Tetris started causing a craze among the older generation, many of whom had previously been critical of Kishin. Their perception changed as they experienced the remade Tetris firsthand. In a surprising turn of events that left many in the business world astounded, Kishin opted to recreate a video game from the past. At the Tora headquarters in a meeting of the board of directors, Chairman Asahi shared his thoughts, saying, "I've always been anticipating that Kishin would eventually release their own 16-bit console. However, instead of that, they've chosen to remake a video game from the past. What's intriguing is that a game with the potential to appeal to all age groups is exclusively available on arcade machines." He paused, adding, "It's a rather intriguing move on Kishin's part." The board of directors exchanged glances, and one of them remarked, "It's quite unusual, to be honest. Kishin should be well aware of the popularity it could generate. Why didn't they capitalize on it and release it for the Kishin Famicom or KES consoles as well?" Chairman Asahi and the board of directors exchanged nods, and one of the directors added contemplatively, "Perhaps Kishin was simply testing the waters with arcade machines before considering mass production of the Tetris video game cartridge, don't you think?" Chairman Asahi and the board of directors nodded in agreement, acknowledging the logic behind this perspective. Chairman Asahi continued, "Regardless, the potential of Tetris, a classic video game from the past, is clear evidence of its relevance in today's video game industry." He paused thoughtfully and added, "It's notable that Kishin had this idea ahead of us." The board of directors responded with wry chuckles, and one of them remarked, "What can we expect? Kishin is a company with a strong focus on video games, so their innovative approach shouldn't come as a surprise." Some of the board of directors nodded in agreement, and one of them remarked, "Kishin has excelled in other areas as well. Take, for instance, their toy Lego, which became a massive hit this year, and the anime Pokemon. Both were favorites of my child. The room fell unusually silent as everyone recognized the immense popularity of Lego and the Pokemon anime. These products had undoubtedly contributed significantly to Kishin's owner's wealth, estimated in the billions of yen, which was undeniably impressive. Chairman Asahi and the board of directors remained quiet, and one of the directors finally said, "That's true. Perhaps Kishin's innovation lies more in the realm of children's products." He consoled himself with these words, although his pride couldn't easily accept a smaller company like Kishin outperforming them. Chairman Asahi shifted the conversation, asking, "How is our anime production progressing?" He directed his gaze to one of the directors, Sandoke, the 30-year-old CEO of Tora Entertainment, who was overseeing the anime project meant to rival Kishin's Pokemon. Sandoke nodded and began, "The anime production is progressing well. The writers have already developed the scripts and the project's concept. The directors we've brought on board are influential figures within the anime industry." Chairman Asahi nodded in response and then posed the question that was on the minds of the board of directors, "What is the concept of the anime?" All eyes were on Sandoke as he prepared to answer. Sandoke displayed a confident smile as he explained, "The concept revolves around mechs or robots controlled by humans, engaged in battles on both Earth and in space. It weaves a narrative of..." He proceeded to elaborate on the anime project's concepts and storyline, and as he spoke, Chairman Asahi and the board of directors listened with keen interest. Chairman Asahi nodded appreciatively and commented, "Interesting. This concept sets us apart from Pokemon, so we shouldn't face criticism for overlapping ideas." The board of directors nodded in agreement, and one of them chimed in, "It's undeniably an intriguing idea. However, we can't be certain if it will capture the attention of the public, especially the younger generation." Upon hearing this, the rest of the board members also nodded, acknowledging the uncertainty. Sandoke responded with a smile, "Indeed, but we have a unique concept centered around mechs and robots." He paused, wearing a confident grin, and continued, "Who isn't fascinated by robots when they're young?" Sandoke glanced around the room, noting the lack of objections, and added, "Young people have a natural affinity for robots, so we shouldn't be overly concerned about its potential popularity." Chairman Asahi and the board of directors nodded in agreement, finding Sandoke's words to be both logical and reasonable. Suzuki Financial Headquarters. CEO's Office. Shiko and Seiki, along with the CEOs of NHK and TBS, gathered in the office. Higatsuyoshi, a 43-year-old man, served as the CEO of NHK, while Takara Toya, a 32-year-old man, held the position of CEO at TBS. Currently, they are in the office to discuss their anime project with the Suzuki family members. Just like Tora, the Suzuki family has its team of writers working on new concepts and ideas for their anime, as well as skilled directors to oversee the production. At present, the Suzuki brothers were in the final stages of negotiating agreements with the two major network CEOs. Coincidentally, the anime concept developed by Suzuki bore striking resemblance to that of Tora. Whether it was a genuine coincidence or if Tora and Suzuki were independently arriving at similar ideas through espionage remained unknown. However, it was likely that the audience would be the first to notice these similarities when the respective shows aired. Chapter 146, Controversy. As Tetris achieved significant success in arcades, Tora and Suzuki were also contemplating remaking a classic video game from the past. They disliked the idea of following in Kishin's footsteps, but they had little choice, given Kishin's remarkable success with unconventional ideas that no one had considered before. It's not merely about eccentricity or risk-taking, as businesspeople typically possess at least one of these traits, if not both. However, Kishin's innovative thinking, daring, and risk-taking exceeded their wildest expectations. Initially, they ventured into the anime industry, elevating its popularity with their captivating anime. Subsequently, they entered the entertainment, particularly the music industry, capturing the attention of audiences in both the US and Asia. Then, they ventured into the toy industry, which turned out to be more profitable than some of Kishin's video games or even their video game consoles. The standout success was Lego. Currently, in the United States of America, Lego has become the center of controversy. Why? Because several major US media outlets suddenly ignited a controversy surrounding Lego. The first to report was CNN News, a prominent cable network. The female news anchor, radiating beauty, flashed a smile at the camera while reading from the prompter. She asked, "Have you ever visited a store or mall just to buy Lego?" Pausing cheerfully, she continued with a picture of Lego beside her, "But did you know that the concept behind these toys didn't originate with Kishin merchandise?" Beside the image of Lego, there was a question mark. The news anchor then stated, "Let's take a look at Lucas Moore's report." The scene shifted to Lucas Moore, a 24-year-old blonde Caucasian. He greeted with a smile, saying, "Thank you, Miss Coleman." With enthusiasm, he continued, presenting scenes of a bustling toy store with a close-up of a Lego box. He went on to say, "For those unaware, our research reveals that Kishin merchandise wasn't the originator of Lego. The concept of toy building bricks dates back to the 1930s, with the American Rubber Specialties Company." The scene transitioned to a picture of the 1930s company and the toy product believed to be the original inspiration for Lego. Indeed, viewers at home were astounded by the striking resemblance to Lego. Lucas Moore continued, saying, "Following the American Rubber Specialties Company's Build-O bricks, there came the American Plastic Bricks by the Elgo Company." The scene transitioned to display the ELGO Company logo and the box of the American Plastic Bricks toy. Lucas Moore went on, "Notably, the name ELGO Company bore a striking resemblance to Lego." He paused, wearing a knowing smile, and remarked, "It was quite evident which company served as Kishin merchandise's inspiration." He emphasized the word inspired with a hint of mockery. Viewers noticed this and responded with chuckles and faint laughter. Lucas Moore continued, "Furthermore, American Plastic Bricks also inspired Kitty's Craft in the UK. So, this is the intriguing history of Lego and brick toys." As Lucas Moore spoke a series of words, viewers at home experienced a mix of emotions as they absorbed the CNN reporter's report. Some viewers felt a sense of disdain toward Kishin for seemingly emulating other companies' products, while others were less concerned. The CNN report undeniably had an impact on the reputation of Kishin merchandise, and its repercussions extended to other Kishin companies in the days following the heated discussion surrounding knockoffs of Lego from various toy manufacturers. While the sales of Lego and Kishin video games continued to increase, the rate of growth noticeably slowed after the CNN report aired. In response to inquiries from numerous U.S. media outlets, Reynold MacArthur, the president of Kishin Merchandise US, provided the following statement, "As per Kishin Merchandise's CEO, the term Lego is derived from the Latin word lego, which means I put together or to put things together. The name Lego was not copied from the ELGO company. It was purely coincidental." He further explained that their Lego toy was not a copy or knockoff of any other products. Reynold MacArthur's quotes were featured in various media outlets, with many viewers accepting the explanation while others remained skeptical. Considering that the ELGO company was long defunct, many people didn't care whether Kishin had truly copied or been inspired by them. They simply enjoyed playing and building with their Lego sets. Nonetheless, the controversy surrounding Lego persisted, and numerous companies relished in Kishin merchandise's predicament. With news that Lego was either a knockoff or inspired by earlier toy companies, many other businesses began contemplating the release of their own brick-based toys. They aimed to tread carefully, avoiding direct copying of Kishin merchandise's Lego, thereby sidestepping potential copyright issues. Tora and Suzuki found amusement in the current situation facing Kishin merchandise as they finalized the design of their own brick-based toy, which was set for manufacturing and mass production before hitting the market. Considering the lucrative profits in the toy industry, they couldn't afford to pass up such a golden opportunity. For them, the opinions of others were of little consequence when money was at stake. This was particularly true now that Kishin merchandise was under intense scrutiny not only from US media outlets but also from media outlets in Japan and various Asian countries. Tora and Suzuki seized this chance to amplify the information about the history of brick-based toys, aiming to raise awareness and foster greater disapproval of Kishin merchandise as Lego toy. Even Toys R Us began to express concerns over this controversy. However, Shin, on the other hand, felt somewhat powerless but refused to let excessive worry consume him. The reason being that Lego wasn't the sole popular product or toy from Kishin merchandise. Pokémon cards were rapidly gaining popularity in Japan and throughout Asia. Moreover, even though Pokémon cards had not yet been introduced in the USA and some European countries due to their unfamiliarity with the Pokémon anime, Shin had already initiated contact with network channels, specifically kids channels, to facilitate the release of Pokémon anime in the USA and select parts of Europe. Tora and Suzuki were on high alert, fearing that Kishin's move to release Pokémon anime in the USA and certain parts of Europe might soon become a reality. Chapter 147, Inadvertently Offending WB. Toshima Ward, Tokyo, Japan. Kishin Headquarters. Shin absent-mindedly stroked his chin while watching CNN, the cable network, critique his products, with a particular focus on Lego, during a television broadcast. Seems like Warner Brothers enjoys taking jabs at my companies, Shin mused with a chuckle, pondering, could it be because I ventured into the film industry? His mind drifted to Kishin Pictures' ongoing film project, currently in production at Red Rock Canyon State Park in California. The project was under the direction of Steven Spielberg, a parallel world counterpart to the renowned Steven Spielberg. Given Shin's trust in Steven Spielberg and his limited knowledge of filmmaking, he opted to let the professionals handle the project without excessive interference in an area where he lacked expertise. Speaking of which, perhaps Warner Brothers was using CNN as a somewhat friendly cautionary platform to remind Shin that overconfidence might not be in his best interest. This could be their subtle way of suggesting that entering the fiercely competitive film industry wouldn't be a walk in the park, or it might just be a reminder that challenging the Big Six shouldn't be underestimated. A smile of realization crossed Shin's face as he arrived at this conclusion. He mused, now that I think about it, Cartoon Network hasn't been established yet at this point in time. Maybe I could consider creating a cable channel for airing Pokémon content. Even though Shin had already reached out to numerous cable kids network channels in the USA, he had a sudden recollection of Cartoon Network, a cable network that might not even exist in this parallel world. From his knowledge, he remembered that the Turner Broadcasting System had acquired Hanna-Barbera Productions, along with its vast animation library, and subsequently launched a cable network known as Cartoon Network to showcase this animation content. Later on, Turner Broadcasting System went through a merger with Warner Brothers. Shin couldn't help but chuckle wryly as he pondered this situation. If the universe or a higher power were trying to convey a message he hadn't noticed, it seemed he was oblivious to it. With a wry smile, Shin remarked, "But isn't Hanna-Barbera Productions rather costly?" From what he recalled, it had been acquired by TBS, Turner Broadcasting System, for hundreds of millions of dollars. However, Shin wasn't even certain if Hanna-Barbera Productions existed in this parallel world. It appeared that Shin needed to confirm whether it existed in this world. With determination, Shin decided to reach out to Oryo Masayoshi once again. Warner Boulevard, California. Warner Brothers. Headquarters. Frank Wilson, a 25-year-old, currently held the position of CEO at Warner Brothers. It was Frank Wilson who had devised the strategy of consistently subjecting Kishin companies to criticism, particularly since the successful Lego toy had provided an opportunity for this approach. While Kishin had not initiated a direct attack on them by entering the film industry and was simply retaliating against Universal Studio, Warner Brothers was also a significant player in the film industry. Kishin couldn't afford to alienate them, yet they found themselves offended by Kishin's foray into the film industry. At the moment, Frank Wilson and the other executives were gathered in the conference room. They were engaged in discussions concerning various topics that were closely tied to their company's profits and losses. A man dressed in a black suit discreetly entered the conference room, making an effort not to disrupt the ongoing meeting. He approached Frank Wilson, the CEO, with due respect, and whispered something into the CEO's right ear. Upon hearing what the man had to say, Frank Wilson promptly addressed the assembly, saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we need to momentarily adjourn our important meeting." The executives halted their discussions, their attention directed towards CEO Frank Wilson. As all eyes turned to him, Frank Wilson offered a faint smile before revealing, "I've just been informed of some intriguing news by my secretary." He glanced sidelong at the man beside him, who discreetly lowered his head. Curiosity piqued among the executives, and one of them inquired, "Oh? Pray, do tell us what it is." Frank Wilson smiled and gave a nod to the man beside him, urging him to share the information. The man in the sharp black suit nodded and conveyed, "According to the intelligence I've received, Kishin Pictures has invested at least $60 to $70 million in their debut film project, Jurassic Park." His tone was deeply respectful. Upon hearing this revelation, the executives were taken aback, and one among them exclaimed in disbelief, $60 to $70 million for their first film project. The executives burst into conversations, and one of them chuckled, remarking, "Hee, that film project must have incredible potential, wouldn't you say? Ha ha ha. It's Kishin Pictures, a new entrant in the film industry without a clue about our business," quipped another executive. Yet another chimed in, saying, "What do you expect from such an ambitious company?" CEO Frank Wilson and the executives found amusement in the situation. Frank Wilson joined in the laughter, commenting, "Hee, the higher a bird soars, the farther it might fall if it encounters a skyscraper." The executives chuckled upon hearing his words. Frank Wilson and the executives didn't perceive any real threat from a film project like Jurassic Park by Kishin Pictures. This lack of concern stemmed from the fact that Kishin Pictures was a newcomer in the industry, primarily known in Hollywood due to its parent company, Kishin Electronics, which had ambitious endeavors beyond their expertise. These aspirations had led to skepticism and ridicule from many people regarding the Japanese company. In response, one of the executives suggested, "We ought to disseminate this information to the public, which could tarnish Kishin's reputation in the eyes of the masses." Another executive responded with amusement, "Sounds like a plan." The executives nodded in agreement as they turned their attention to CEO Frank Wilson. Frank Wilson let out a chuckle and remarked, "Even if you hadn't mentioned it, I had already been contemplating that." He had been mulling over the idea of undermining Kishin's reputation in Hollywood. He understood that challenging the Big Six, even indirectly, meant inviting trouble. Frank Wilson then declared, "We're going to tarnish the reputation of that Japanese company known as Kishin in Hollywood." He paused, chuckled, and added, "I'll see to it personally." The executives couldn't help but share a faint laugh as they listened to CEO Frank Wilson's words. They were well aware of his determination, and once he set his mind on something, convincing him otherwise was a formidable task. Bullying the emerging Japanese company, Kishin, was certainly not an ordinary pursuit for Frank Wilson, and the executives understood that quite well. Chapter 148, Acquisition and Rare Pokémon Cards. Sazuma's Mansion. Sazuma found himself engrossed in the arcade machine, running a game of Tetris in the comfort of his own home. He had procured the arcade cabinet because Tetris was exclusively available at arcades, which compelled him to invest in this gaming setup. This video game is even more addictive than the original, Sazuma exclaimed, his mind awash with memories of Tetris. Kumiko, who stood beside him, watching him play, smiled as nostalgia washed over her, evoking memories from the past. USA. News of Kishin Pictures investing tens of millions in a film project captured the public's attention, and many film enthusiasts chuckled at Kishin's ambitious endeavor. Almost everyone is critiquing Kishin for its ambitions that seem as vast as a mountain. However, just a few days after that initial news, another astonishing announcement regarding Kishin emerged. The news revealed that Kishin had acquired Hanna-Barbera Productions for a staggering $280 million. Upon learning of these colossal figures, a multitude of individuals intensified their criticism of Kishin for what appeared to be questionable decisions. In particular, Warner Brothers seemed to have insight into Kishin's intentions behind acquiring an animation studio that already held sway in Hollywood. Meanwhile, TBS, who had contemplated acquiring Hanna-Barbera Productions, could only sigh in regret as the animation studio was snapped up by Kishin Pictures. They found themselves blaming their own prolonged hesitancy. Concurrently, negotiations between the Cable Kids networks and Kishin for airing Pokémon had reached a successful agreement. A few days later, Kishin held a press conference that drew the attention of numerous media outlets. A Fox reporter inquired, "What's the motive behind acquiring such a renowned American animation studio?" Directed at Julius Parker, the 28-year-old president of Kishin Entertainment. Julius Parker, a Caucasian gentleman, paused briefly before responding, "That's precisely why we've called this press conference. We intend to launch a cable network that will serve as a platform for the vast animation library of Hanna-Barbera Productions." Following this statement, the reporters eagerly jotted down the details, and a CBN reporter inquired, "When is this cable network going to be launched?" Julius Parker, with a confident smile, replied, "It will launch on January 1, 1992, which was just a few days away as it was presently December 28, 1991. The reporters were taken aback by the swiftness of Kishin's network launch. Then, another reporter asked, "What will the cable network be named?" Julius Parker beamed and replied in line with Shin's directives, "It will be named Cartoon Network." In the midst of the excitement, the executives standing beside Julius Parker chimed in, "Furthermore, we're pleased to announce that the popular anime Pokémon, gaining recognition in Asia, will premiere on a few cable network channels on January 5, 1992. However, it will first air on our Cartoon Network channel on January 1, 1992. The reporters duly took note of this, and while they acknowledged that Pokémon had garnered significant attention in Asia, they were not overly optimistic about its potential success in the USA. Tokyo, Japan. January 1, 1992. Shin and Myra celebrated the arrival of the new year together while they watched the fireworks illuminating the night sky. New Year's celebrations unfolded simultaneously in various countries around the world. Following this, Shin and Myra spent time with Myra's family before meeting with Shin's own, although they weren't exactly welcomed by the Suzuki family, particularly his elder and third brothers. In an audacious move, Reina shamelessly made a request, saying, "Hey, Shin, you're already so wealthy, could you spare some pocket money?" Upon hearing this, their parents reprimanded Reina once more. Nevertheless, Shin surprised Reina by gifting her a rare Pokémon card, a Charizard Shadowless First Edition. When Reina examined the card more closely, her expression soured. "What's this? A Pokémon card? What am I supposed to do with it?" She carelessly tossed the Pokémon card aside, catching the attention of Shiko and Seiki. Shin smiled at her reaction and remarked, "You don't like it? It's quite rare, you know." Reina merely snorted, convinced that Shin was teasing her. Suddenly, Seiki blurted out without thinking when he saw the Pokémon card that Shin had given Reina, "It's the first edition Charizard Shadowless Pokémon card." He quickly covered his mouth, realizing that Shin was still present. Shiko regarded Seiki with a touch of disdain. Although he was also a Pokémon fan, he saw no need to lose his composure over a rare card, especially in front of their least favorite brother. Shin chuckled as he witnessed Seiki's genuine surprise at the Pokémon card. He then said, "If you want it, you can have it, provided our spoiled Reina doesn't want it." Shiro and Eri examined the Pokemon card carefully after Seiki's exclamation, and Chiko inquired, "Oh? Is it a rare card?" Rookie also inspected the Pokemon card attentively but remained silent, as she had already been gifted an even rarer card by Shin the Pikachu illustrator, of which there were only 20 in existence. Suddenly, the door of the Suzuki mansion swung open with force, drawing Shiro's attention. He was about to reprimand the intruder, but upon closer inspection, he realized that it was his father, Sazuma Suzuki. Sazuma and Kumiko entered the house and joined the family gathering of Shiro. Sazuma turned his attention to Shin and exclaimed, "You rascal! You didn't pay me a visit on New Year's? What's the meaning of this?" Kumiko, who stood beside her husband, appeared somewhat helpless. Shiro couldn't help but chuckle wryly at the fact that his father had come to seek out Shin instead of him. Shin, with a wry smile, reached into his wallet and retrieved a Pokemon card. He said, "Here, grandfather, my New Year's present." He presented the Pokemon card to Sazuma. Sazuma accepted the card and was genuinely surprised, his eyes widening as he asked, "Is this? Could it be the rare Pokemon card I've been searching for?" A stunned silence fell over everyone as it was revealed that the elderly Sazuma was an avid viewer of an anime, particularly a children's one. Shiko and Seiki leaned in to examine the Pokemon card closely, and they both exclaimed, "It's a Pikachu illustrator." Shiko and Eri exchanged wry glances, perplexed by the significance of the cards that had caused their two sons to lose their composure. Myra couldn't help but snort at Shin's two brothers, especially considering their inability to maintain their composure over Pokemon cards. Observing her two brothers' reactions to the Pokemon card, Reina suddenly sensed that the card must hold significant value for them, prompting her to swiftly retrieve the Pokemon card she had carelessly tossed aside earlier. Shiko and Seiki couldn't help but feel a sense of pity as even their spoiled sister came to recognize the card's worth. Simultaneously, they contemplated following in Kishin's footsteps, planning to release their own anime cards once their anime was launched, in hopes of possessing rare cards that would drive people to excitement. They, too, found themselves unable to maintain their composure over a Pokemon card from their younger brother's company, a fact that brought considerable embarrassment to them. Chapter 149, Pokemon in USA and Kishin's Crisis. USA. Americans celebrated the New Year at 12 a.m., and shortly after, many fans of the animated series Kishin tuned into their respective television sets and switched to the new cable network, Cartoon Network, which began airing at 6 a.m. At 6 a.m., the featured cartoon on television was Tom and Jerry. During a brief advertisement break, the narrator revealed the upcoming animation schedule for Cartoon Network, and viewers learned that the beloved anime Pokemon would be airing at 7 a.m. Most of the viewers, especially the younger audience, decided to stay and watch, while some opted to turn off their televisions and head outside to play. As 7 a.m. drew near, the highly anticipated anime Pokemon was on the verge of starting. Many young people across various households eagerly gathered to watch the highly anticipated Pokemon anime. In one particular household, a group of men gathered around their friend's television and engaged in a conversation. "I've been quite curious about this cartoon. My Asian friend told me it's incredibly popular in his country," one of the men named Ronald shared. Curious, another inquired, "Which country is he from?" Ronald replied, "He's from South Korea." To this, Leonard, one of the men in the group, commented, "Really? I assumed he might be from China." Ronald chuckled wryly as he responded, "Well, being Asian doesn't always mean being Chinese." The men chuckled wryly at Leonard's assumption, and one of them, named Arnold, remarked, "Hee, Leonard must have thought that being Asian meant only being from China or Japan." Leonard quickly responded, "Of course not. I also know an Asian who is a Filipino." The mispronunciation of Filipino as Filipino drew laughter from everyone, making it clear that Leonard was the American who had some room for improvement in recognizing different Asian nationalities. Then, Ronald, pointing at the television, whispered, "The Pokemon cartoon is finally starting." All eyes turned to the TV screen, and indeed, the Pokemon anime began with its iconic theme song. Ronald sang along, "Gotta catch 'em all." His friends nodded in rhythm, and Leonard exclaimed, "Well, the song is quite catchy." Arnold added, "It's by Kishin, and I've listened to most of their songs, they're all high quality, so it's not surprising." As the Pokemon anime continued, Ronald and his friends became increasingly engrossed in the show. However, a brief commercial break interrupted their focus, and Leonard commented, "It's quite interesting." Ronald nodded as he stroked his chin and remarked, "I'm really starting to like it, especially that cute yellow creature." Everyone agreed, and after the brief commercial break, the Pokemon anime resumed. Time flew by, and before they realized it, they had finished watching the Pokemon episode. Ronald and his friends were captivated by the intriguing concept of creatures with special powers, known as Pokemon, being captured by Pokemon trainers. It was undeniably fascinating. Not only them, but many people across the USA who tuned in to watch Pokemon were also captivated by this new concept and the captivating storyline. The great news was that Pokemon episodes would be airing on Cartoon Network every Monday through Wednesday, which meant that viewers could enjoy 3 episodes of Pokemon per week. Regarding other children's cable channels, they also scheduled 3 consecutive episodes of Pokemon per week. Consequently, many individuals who had missed Pokemon on Cartoon Network started tuning into their respective cable channels to catch up. In just a few days, word of Pokemon had already spread like wildfire among the youth. The series had managed to captivate the younger generation with only 3 episodes aired. After the second week of its release, Pokemon had already caused quite a craze among the young audience, and the Pokemon cards recently released in the Kishin merchandise store were also gaining popularity. Tora and Suzuki, who had anticipated this outcome, felt a sense of gravity about the situation. Kishin was now making waves even in the cable network industry. Interestingly, Pokemon's time slot on other children's cable channels coincidentally coincided with CNN News, causing a noticeable impact on CNN's ratings. As a result, Faye Coleman reported on CNN News, with a dramatic pause, "In recent days, incidents of animal cruelty have unexpectedly emerged in some parts of the states, and the suspects were..." She stopped as the headline image appeared beside her, creating suspense, and then added, "Children and youth." Viewers were taken aback. Children and youth involved in practicing animal cruelty? What could this possibly mean? Faye Coleman, the female news anchor, then directed, "Let's tune into the report by Arthur Matthew." The scene transitioned to the news reporter, Arthur Matthew, standing upright and addressing the camera directly. In a solemn tone, Arthur Matthew confirmed, "That's correct," and paused as he presented footage showing a group of children having their cats and dogs pitted against each other. One of the children encouraged his Chihuahua dog, saying, "Go and attack, Ernesto." On the other side, another child called to his cat, "Go, Meowth." However, instead of facing off, the Chihuahua quickly ran away and barked at the child. In response, the child simply patted the dog's head to calm it down, and the footage concluded. The scene shifted back to Arthur Matthew, who maintained a direct gaze at the camera, though the cameraman behind the scenes struggled to stifle his chuckles during the pet's less-than-epic encounter. With a stoic expression, Arthur Matthew reported, "As you can see, these events have reportedly occurred in some parts of the United States. While rare, they have raised concerns at the Humane Society of the United States." To clarify the confusion for viewers, Arthur Matthew continued, "The cause behind this phenomenon is believed to be the gradually growing popularity of the anime Pokemon in the United States." He added, "We have reached out to Cartoon Network and its parent company, Kishin, regarding this issue, but they have not provided any comments at this time." Viewers at home watched the news with furrowed brows and concerned frowns. Many parents took this as an opportunity to caution their young generation against watching Pokémon. Meanwhile, Tora and Suzuki had released highly impressive video games that fully utilized the capabilities of the 16-bit console. Tora's game, Lori, featured a young boy named Lori solving puzzles and progressing through stages. The developers at Tora had learned from their past mistakes and improved the gameplay, which attracted numerous video game enthusiasts. Suzuki, on the other hand, launched Legendary Knight, a game in which a knight named Gilgamesh battled monsters and bosses. The gameplay had also seen significant improvements. Both Tora and Suzuki's video games were gaining popularity not only in Asia but also in the USA. Slowly but surely, Kishin's competitors were gaining ground, and many were beginning to speculate that 1992 might become the worst nightmare for Kishin. The company's ambitious ventures into various industries instead of focusing on its core expertise, video games, were starting to show their repercussions. Chapter 150, Urgency in One Piece. In Tokyo, Japan, despite the popularity of the Pokémon anime in the United States, the Kishin franchise was gradually losing ground due to fierce competition from video games released by Tora and Suzuki. The rapid advancements in graphics, sprites, and the superior 16-bit consoles were becoming increasingly evident. While many people still enjoyed Kishin's video games for their innovative gameplay, it was undeniable that the graphics were becoming outdated by 1992. Consequently, Kishin SKT Famicom sales saw a gradual decline, while Tora and Suzuki's video game consoles experienced a steady rise in sales. Furthermore, Suzuki also introduced their anime, Mechanical Hero, which revolved around a group of 5 young individuals operating a massive robot to combat villains or hostile nations with destructive intentions, seeking to conquer or wreak havoc. The Mechanical Hero was always there to save the day. This series gained popularity, particularly among the youth and children. While it may not have reached the same level of popularity as Pokémon, it captivated young Japanese viewers with a peculiar fascination for robots. Similarly, Tora released an anime featuring robots, but with a unique twist. It featured a giant robot controlled by a lone individual, with the central character, Akisa Mori, embarking on a journey to become the greatest mecha pilot. Akisa Mori engaged in duels with other mecha pilots, whether they were heroes or villains, making for an intriguing plot that outshone Suzuki's anime. However, it might not yet be on the same level as Pokémon in terms of popularity. Tora's anime, titled Great Mecha, not only gained popularity in Japan but also outshone Suzuki's Mechanical Hero in terms of its storyline and overall appeal. The innovations introduced by Tora and Suzuki in the realm of animation entertainment and video games quickly became evident to the masses in Japan. Many devoted Kishin fans grew concerned about the future of the Kishin brand. In Asia, a significant number of Kishin's video games were pirated and sold at lower prices in some parts of the continent. This piracy led to a gradual decline in Kishin's video game sales. Moreover, Fami clones from China entered the market. Despite their faulty performance, these inexpensive video game consoles could run some Kishin video games, further contributing to the decline in Kishin's Famicom sales. Toshima Ward, Tokyo, Japan. Kishin headquarters. As worries loomed over the fate of Kishin, some eagerly anticipated the company's potential downfall. Shin, upon hearing of the challenges the company faced, wore a grave expression on his face. Beside him, Myra looked at him and asked, "Should we finally release our 16-bit and Game Boy?" Myra was deeply concerned and overwhelmed by the challenges confronting Kishin. She felt as though the world was turning against them after the company's relatively smooth sailing for about a year or so. Shin shook his head and reassured, "We'll address that, don't worry. But it's not the right time for it just yet." Myra, still visibly concerned, was about to voice her thoughts when Shin chuckled and retrieved something from his office desk. He handed a manga to Myra, offering comfort, and said, "To help calm your nerves, read this." Curiously, Myra examined the manga cover, spotting the title One Piece in English letters. She exclaimed, "A manga!" Clearly puzzled about why Shin was giving it to her. Shin nodded with a smile and explained, "Ctto authored this manga, and it falls under Kishin and Shounen Jump's rights," pointing to the Kishin logo on the manga cover. Myra nodded and opened the pages, her curiosity piqued. Shin smiled warmly at Myra. Currently, many of their retail partners were inquiring about the release of their 16-bit console. Shin acknowledged the need to release it, but the 16-bit system still required optimization and performance enhancements. As for the Game Boy, since Shin had enlisted the assistance of researchers from Silicon Valley to create a color Game Boy, it was also undergoing testing to determine if it needed further optimization and quality improvements. These tests were expected to be completed around February. While Kishin faced numerous challenges due to its ambitious endeavors, Dragon Ball, a manga sponsored by Kishin, was experiencing a tremendous surge in popularity within the manga industry. The manga Dragon Ball had been largely overlooked by the business world, and Kishin's investments in the industry had been forgotten. However, the popularity of Dragon Ball continued to rise with each passing day. Dragon Ball had already published 15 chapters, completing the first volume titled Monkey King and now moving on to the second volume. Enthusiastic manga fans engaged in lively discussions about the plot of Dragon Ball. As manga enthusiasts remained passionate about Dragon Ball, another manga emerged destined for great success, One Piece. Young Okubo Kenji purchased the Shounen Jump weekly magazine with the intention of reading Dragon Ball, but he stumbled upon an intriguing new manga. The first page of the manga displayed the title One Piece along with the One Piece logo, followed by Chapter 1, Romance Dawn. On the same page, a passage read, "Gold Roger, the king of the pirates, had achieved it all. Wealth, fame, and power had all been his." Accompanied by an illustration of two soldiers crossing swords with a mysterious figure in a coat. The subsequent paragraph explained, not surprisingly, the final words he spoke before they lopped off his head inspired adventurers throughout the world to sail the seas. In the next panel, a man with a comical mustache wore a wide grin as he declared, "My treasure? Why, it's right where I left it." He then added, "It's yours if you can find it. But you'll have to search the whole world." The following panel depicted a jubilant crowd roaring with enthusiasm, shouting, "Roar!" On the upper right side, a paragraph began with the words, "the world," and on the lower left side, another paragraph continued the thought with, "is about to embark on the great era of piracy." Okubo Kenji's interest was greatly piqued as he turned the page. The second page featured a drawing of a young woman cheering with her arms raised to the air, surrounded by various unfamiliar characters. With this, Okubo Kenji became fully engrossed and began reading the first chapter of One Piece. He couldn't help but chuckle as he read about Luffy's mockery of the overweight female pirate and laughed at the child with glasses and a comical appearance. Everything about the manga felt fresh and engaging. Okubo Kenji particularly appreciated the art style, which he found to be both unique and appealing. The fight scenes had a comical touch, and the characters' expressions seemed to draw inspiration from Dragon Ball or American cartoons like Tom and Jerry. Regardless, Okubo Kenji thoroughly enjoyed the manga, even from just the first chapter. After finishing the first chapter of One Piece, he continued by flipping the pages to read Dragon Ball.